Ladies and gentlemen, it's a true pleasure to say good morning and welcome all of you to today's standing committee. And as all of you are aware, it's a very important meeting and we have a long agenda. So let's start and not waste the time. I would also like to say welcome to Vancouver. And it's a great pleasure to see all of you here for the 30th annual session of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is being recorded. And let me first warmly thank our friends from the Canadian Parliament for their generosity and hospitality this week. Let me use this opportunity to welcome those of you participating in the meeting of the Standing Committee for the first time. And now move on to number 1, adoption of the agenda. I would like to ask you first to adopt the agenda for today's meeting. The agenda has been circulated. Can we adopt the agenda? Yes, the agenda is adopted. Thank you. And then we go further on to the number 2, practical and procedural matters for the 30th annual session. The annual session's practical and procedural information, as well as a document explaining in detail the process for electing assembly and committee officers have been widely circulated in advance of today's meeting. And let me just highlight a few important points. With regards to the election, not the election, elections, because there are several of them. The deadline for nominations of assembly officers is 10 a.m. on Monday, 3rd July. Early voting for members who have an unavoidable obligation to leave the annual session before Tuesday will take place from 12 noon to 6 p.m. on Monday, 3rd July. I remind you that members must request early voting in writing before 5:30 p.m. on Monday, the 3rd July. The elections for assembly officers will be held on the morning of Tuesday, 4th July, between 8:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. If a second round is needed, it will be held on Tuesday, 4th July. Once ballots have been made available, presumably between 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. I have appointed Peter Juel Jensen from Denmark, Paola Cardoso from Portugal, and Malik Ben Achor from Belgium as tellers. With regards to the list of speakers, in line with Rule 27(2), members wishing to speak in general debates should sign up no later than 1 hour before the announced time of the opening of the sitting. I stress this in particular for our 3rd July plenary, which has strict time constraints. Let me also announce that Lord Smith of Hindhead will be chairing the drafting committee in charge of preparing the Vancouver declaration. Thank you very much for this duty. Dear heads of delegation, let me take a moment now to explain that the Standing Committee will be asked to take several decisions. The Standing Committee will first be asked to approve the list of registered participants. This is a technical matter to validate signatures for amendments on supplementary items. The Standing Committee will then be asked to approve membership of the General Committees. Again, this is a technical matter to ensure compliance with our rules of procedure. After this, the Standing Committee will be asked to place supplementary items on the agenda of the annual session and to confirm their placement for consideration by the plenary or a general committee. Please note that according to the rules of procedure, the inclusion of supplementary items on the agenda of the annual session requires a 2/3 majority. Their allocation to a committee or the plenary requires a simple majority. All other decisions will require consensus -1. Following these technical matters, the Standing Committee will be asked to approve the budget and consider an extra budgetary item proposed by the Treasurer. In addition, 3 amendments to the Rules of Procedure have been tabled along with the proposal to establish a new ad hoc committee. Are there any questions on these issues before we proceed on the agenda? Please raise your hands. I don't see so. So this is done, and let's go further on. Approval of registered participation. It's number 21, and it's related to Rule 24.1. The International Secretariat has distributed the preliminary list of participants. The International Secretariat has been notified about members of the Assembly who had registered for the meeting but who are unable to attend. Their names do not appear on this list, but in accordance with Rule 24.2, their signatures will remain valid. Of course, the International Secretariat can provide their names to any member who wishes. For the purpose of validation of signature, do the Standing Committee approve the list? Anybody against? No, the list is approved. Number 2.2, ratification of the membership of the 3 general committees, Rule 36.2. In accordance with Rule 36.2, membership of the general committees shall be ratified by the Standing Committee or the Bureau. All delegations have been reminded of the request of the Standing Committee that the distribution of members between the 3 general committees should be as equal as possible. The Secretary General has indicated to me that these rules have been observed and that the table office is distributing voting cards for the 3 committees in accordance with as equal a division as possible to comply with this. Is the membership of the general committees agreed to? Anybody against? I see that the membership of the general committees is agreed. Thank you. Number 2.3, inclusion and placement of supplementary items. It's rules Rule 21.1. In accordance with Rule 21.1, the agenda of the annual session may be supplemented by an item or a motion on any matter within the competence of the OSCE which does not relate directly to subjects proposed by the general rapporteurs to the three committees. The International Secretariat has received 16 supplementary items with sufficient support for consideration during the annual session. The list of supplementary items has been circulated. These supplementary items now require a 2/3 majority to be included on the agenda of the annual session. Note, however, that Rule 21.1 limits the number of supplementary items to 15. This would force the Standing Committee to eliminate one text. Rule 21.3, however, allows a supplementary item which has no amendment to proceed under a separate procedure with limited debate, thus allowing our annual session to consider all 16 supplementary items. Please note that no amendments have been tabled for 9 supplementary items. I understand that Senator Ben Cardin, who sponsored supplementary item 12 on rising anti-Semitism in the OSCE region, has agreed to have his text considered in the first plenary session under this procedure. We will therefore proceed as follows. The Standing Committee will first be asked whether to include supplementary items on its agenda through a 2/3 majority of the votes cast. And please be reminded that only members who are acting in the capacity of head of delegations have the rights to vote. If no separate vote is requested on any supplementary item, all 16 supplementary items will be deemed to have been agreed to. If all 16 supplementary items pass, supplementary item number 12, sponsored by Senator Ben Cardin, will be considered through the procedure outlined in Rule 21.3. Thus, the Standing Committee approve all items. Anybody against? I find that the Standing Committee have approved all items. Thank you. All 16 supplementary items have been approved by the Standing Committee, but only 15 of them may formally be placed on the agenda. Supplementary item number 12, which has not received any amendments, will be considered under the procedure outlined in Rule 21.3. And now we will go to the allocation of supplementary items. We shall now decide on the allocation of the supplementary items. In accordance with Rule 21.1, the Standing Committee shall decide by a majority of the votes cast whether to refer a supplementary item to the competent committee or to submit it to the plenary. The proposed allocation of supplementary items made by the International Secretariat has been distributed. On the basis of the decision just reached, I propose that the supplementary item number 12, sponsored by Senator Ben Cardin, to be considered by the plenary rather than the third committee, in conjunction with his report as special representative. Are there any objections to the allocation proposed? Anybody? I don't see that there is any objection. The allocation is agreed. Thank you very much. The supplementary items will be allocated as proposed. And now we will go further on the agenda.
Excuse me, Sweden.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I just would like to say, I still haven't been able to go to the optiker to get new glasses. And this means that I am can only read very closely on the paper. And when I look over the assembly, I need to take off my glasses. I will go to the optiker when it's summer free from the parliament. But I just say it because I apologize. Please, head of the Swedish delegation, Björn Söder, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm the principal sponsor of the first supplementary item on condemnation of the desecration of Polish graves in Belarus. And it's recommended by the Secretariat to be handled in the second committee, but I would like to propose that it will be placed in the third committee because it has more focus on the human rights issues than the cultural heritage issues, which the Secretariat uses as an argument to place it in the second committee. So my proposal is that it will be dealt with in the third committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Björn Söder. And I will take all the questions before I put it for the decision. And now it's Ms. Gudrun Kugler, rapporteur of the second committee. The floor is yours, madam.
Thank you, Madam President. I am the head of delegation of Austria, but I am also the rapporteur of the second committee, and I would like to support that supplementary item number 1 would be discussed in the third committee because it's more fitting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gudrun Kugler. And then I notice that head of the Ukrainian delegation have requested the floor. Mr. Mikita Potorayev, the floor is yours.
Colleagues, I think that everybody will agree to set Ukrainian proposal about supplementary item OSCE and OCPA credibility in the face of continued Russian aggression against Ukraine for nearest plenary session of our organization today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikita Potorayev. Anybody else who requests the floor? No, I don't see anybody else request the floor. So now, just to not go quick through the agenda, if you agree, I will go back to a new decision when it's about the allocation of the supplementary items. I will first ask you, is there any objection to relocate the supplementary item number 1, condemnation of the desecration of Polish graves in Belarus by Mr. Björn Söder, from number 2 to the committee number 3? No, I don't see so. This means that the supplementary item number 1 is allocated to committee number 3. Thank you. Yes, I know. And now we go further on the agenda to number 3. I don't know what this paper is because it's not valid. Yes. Now it's number 3, report of the President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And I have my report. It's dressed on the table, and it have also been sent out. But I will give a short oral presentation. Dear colleagues, as I mentioned, the written report has been shared with you, and a comprehensive file covering all reports made during my presidency has also been available. But let me highlight a few key issues I have worked on since our winter meeting in Vienna this year. First, I want to note that Ukraine's existential struggle remains at the top of our political agenda. Russia's war is still existing, and this is clearly demonstrated in the text that will be debated during the annual session. I have put a lot of efforts, just as well as I know that you have done, dear colleagues, to do what we can to support an end of the war, to support Ukraine's right to its international recognized border, independence and sovereignty. And this has been on focus for my work. But in this context, I want to recall that numerous decisions we had in February regarding the participation of the Russian delegations in our meeting. For the record, I want to underline again that our meeting confounded the most negative prognosis. As I clearly stated in my address in Vienna, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly does not provide an unrestricted platform for propaganda. Instead, it was an opportunity for all members of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly to confront the Russian delegates, to hold them accountable and to hold them responsible for their illegal war. And it clearly provides our resolve to support Ukraine and our indisputable unity. In this spirit, we must continue to defend the OSCE value and the reason for why OSCE was founded in 1975 during the Cold War. And so, even through dialogue, it's not possible today. We must make sure that whatever the conditions allow, the OSCE is able to serve as a resource. For many of you, and us, I would say, who are involved with various regional organizations, it is obvious that the OSCE is unique thanks to its membership. This is a message I brought with me through several visits to Central Asia over the course of my presidency. Since the winter meeting, I was able to visit Kazakhstan twice. First, it was for the election observation, where I was one of the observers. But I had also the honor to be. Then I returned to Kazakhstan for a presidential visit with high-level meetings, and also I took part in the Astana Forum and highlighted there what we are doing as a parliamentarian assembly and how we look up on Russia's war against Ukraine and what we do to support Ukraine's independence. I have also had the honor to be the first OSCE PA president to visit Turkmenistan in more than a decade. And I must say it was a very important visit. I am very pleased for the hospitality that was shown. Also, the response from Turkmenistan that gave possibility to meet with politicians on the highest level, but also with, with our colleagues in the parliament, with the civil society, with the students, with women organization. And I look forward further cooperation between OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and Turkmenistan. What also was the focus? It was to support building and maintaining trust between our countries. And I think this is something that OSCE Parliamentary Assembly should focus more on for the future, to support trust building, to support cooperation, because that's a very good way forward for peace and stability, and totally in line with the founding documents for OSCE. And I would also like to thank the German delegation for taking up the Leinsweiler seminar again. This year, the Leinsweiler seminar was held in Berlin, but it was a fruitful dialogue, a very positive discussions. So thank you for bringing this up again. I also raised the issue of interparliamentary and interinstitutional cooperation in Reykjavik when I visit Iceland. And it was in the context of Iceland's chairpersonship of the Council of Europe's Committee of Ministers and ahead of the Fourth Council of Europe, the Europe Summit. And the OSCE-PA, it's very clear for me, must play all its parts in strengthening multilateral engagement to end Russia's war against Ukraine, to rebuild European security order and uphold international law. I say this because there are those who say these days that multilateralism is out of order. It doesn't exist any longer. There is those who say that the OSCE doesn't work. I think our meeting here shows the opposite. OSCE exists, it works. Multilateralism exists, it works. And let's continue this. I have had the opportunity to visit 2 OSCE field operations during this period. And let me again underline the vital work done by the OSCE staff. With great uncertainty regarding the future of the organization and its funding, the conditions are far from ideal. But we, as parliamentarians, must therefore carry on demanding that along with the rest of the OSCE, these missions have to be empowered with adequate and sustainable funding, as well as strong and effective mandates. I firmly believe that the OSCE will remain relevant tomorrow, and that we should continue to support a cooperative security. Here as well, the OSCE PA has a role to play to maintain equal importance between OSCE's 3 dimensions of security. The Baku conference earlier this spring, which focused on the green economy, connectivity, and sustainable development, was a major step in this endeavor. As we have tragically seen in Ukraine, the dramatic implication of the Russian Federation's ongoing war in Ukraine for the economic and environmental security across the OSCE region urge us to identify comprehensive solutions to our interconnected security challenges. In the same vein, I have continued to advocate a greater role for women and youth in international affairs. As I underlined at the Global Parliamentary Congress, The Future of the World in Vilnius, we must continue to encourage those least represented in our national parliaments and in international organizations, like OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Women, young people, minority people, to take on more responsibilities to better prepare for tomorrow. But let me mention here Dr. Heidi Frey's long-standing work on gender, and also mention her work on developing a tool together with UDIR for a gender audit in national parliaments. However, the current political situation in the OSCE is extremely worrying. There is no budget adopted, no decision on who will chair the OSCE next year. There is also, I should say, missions who haven't got a full-fledged year to continue their work, only prolonged for 6 months. And we here, as parliamentarians, we should raise our political support to ensure the continuity of the OSCE process and of the operations. We have continued to do so through a series of call for action events in Vienna, in Ashgabat, and also on the web, where we have had several meetings. This also goes hand in hand with our work to raise awareness about all available OSCE instruments. And after the Bureau meeting in Copenhagen, there was a meeting where I and Kostel Runova, Deputy Chair of the First Committee, met with the OSCE Court of Conciliation and Arbitration. The court is not well known, but I think we as parliamentarians can do more to make the court visible. Because these days, when we are talking about accountability, stability, rules of procedure, the court is a fantastic tool for this. Finally, let me note that since the current international situation also has a direct practical impact on our Assembly's operations, I have taken part in several discussions regarding the OSCE PA's financial planning to determine how to best balance multiple factors, including our political ambitions, an overgrowing engagement of our members, the impact of high inflation on our staff, our activities like election observations, which is one of our flagship activities where we are well known and respected, and very often requested to do more of. And the decision of the Russian delegations to withhold their annual contribution. In conclusion, let me simply thank all of you for the work you are doing. And I will not say thank you, because my mandate, it ends when I close the meeting. And at that time, I will say thank you for cooperation. But I would like to just mention, we, as parliamentarians, we are elected by the people. When we are going here, we represent our constituencies. We represent the people. And when we are here, they expect of us that we are doing everything we can for their possibilities to live in peace, security, to have a future where they can predict their financial situation, where they can live under good climate, under a secure security. And this is what we are doing. And that's what have been my goal for all my presidency, also for the months that have passed since our winter meeting. Thank you. And now I ask if there is any questions or comments on my report. Yes, I noticed that Mr. Kohl, head of the Latvian delegation, have requested the floor. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, for your report. very brief and very outlined. The one thing that is, at least in my mind, is missing from the report, and it's something that we have to address in Parliamentary Assembly, is the very core value of the OECE, and is the election observation. And, well, it's unacceptable, and this should be addressed in this room and at the OECE level, when there are member states that is holding elections, and I'm talking about Turkey right now, that is blocking 2 member state representatives that are members of the OECE Parliamentary Assembly to observe the elections. In those cases, there should be a rule that no one is actually participating in the observations from the OECE Parliamentary Assembly. That wasn't the case, so I ask why there was no reaction at the highest level from the OECE Parliamentary Assembly on this incident, where several members were blocked from going for the election observation in Turkey this year in May. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cools, for your question. It's an important question. What I did when I was informed was to write a letter to Turkey and asking what have happened. I know that there have been discussions on this further on between our Secretariat and Turkey, and it will continue to be so. I totally agree with you that this is unacceptable, that observers are rejected to take part in election observations. Let me also mention that this have happened before when there have been election in Turkey. And it have been similar response. When it was parliamentarian election in Russia, they tried as well to limit our election observation. And at that time, we were in touch with the Council of Europe. We had discussion with ODIHR, and we decided to not observe the election because the rules that were set up was unacceptable. It's the observer organization who should have the decision. But I will also give the floor on this to Secretary General to respond on what activities have been taken by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, there's been this unfortunate event in the last election observation missions in Turkey. It has happened also in a previous election observation mission. The President and the leadership of the election observation has made a démarche normally with the host country and sort of officially informed of our, of course, disagreement with this decision. You are hinting at whether the mission should have, in solidarity, decide, well, we do not do the election observation at all. It's been discussed at the political level, and maybe awaiting the 2 bigger interests, it was still thought maybe it's good to go ahead with the election observation mission, also because we have partners like the Council of Europe, in some cases the NATO Parliamentary Assembly of the European Parliament, and of course the ODIHR. But to note this in the final report, so to sort of go ahead with the mission, make an official démarche, public official démarche to the authorities expressing our displeasure with the decision, but go ahead with the mission and note it in our final report. So this has been the policy, but of course the political leadership can decide that maybe a stronger message would be that in solidarity with members who have not been granted access, we should call off. I mean, this is it's a political decision, and we can argue both ways. Indeed, Madam President made reference to the Russian Federation as well. In the Russian Federation, there's been also individuals who have been prevented from going, but there's been also in the past, in the last election actually, a decision from the Russian Federation to decide on the numbers of observers. And in that case, we have decided not to go. not to go because we do not accept that the participating state can decide on the, let's say, on the capabilities we deploy in a country, because this is normally discussed and assessed with the ODIHR colleagues in what we call a need assessment mission. So we go before, we look at how big is the country, we look at what are the challenges, and then we independently decide what is the number of short and long-term observers we want to have in that country. And if a host country decides, no, you have to have less numbers, then in that case we decided, okay, then we do not come to the Russian Federation. And this is what we did last time. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. Yes, head of the Turkish delegation have requested the floor. The floor is yours, sir.
Değerli Başkan, Litvanya heyeti üyesinin söylemiş olduğu sözleri
There will be interpretation in English consecutive.
Kabul etmemiz mümkün değil.
Madam President, thank you very much for giving us the floor. The statement made by the Latvian delegation is unacceptable.
Türkiye aleyhine faaliyette bulunan ve devamlı Türkiye aleyhine kendi ülkelerinde yoğun bir şekilde propagandaya karışan hiçbir kimseyi bundan sonraki seçim gözlemlerinde de kabul etmeyeceğiz.
No delegates who are continuing their propaganda against Turkey within their respective countries will not be allowed to participate in that kind of election observations.
Gelen gözlem heyetindeki o iki kişinin sağlıklı ve tarafsız bir gözlem yapacağına biz inanmadık. Onun için de vize vermedik. Bundan sonra aynı uygulamaya devam edeceğiz.
We didn't believe that. Two participants who were rejected were able to conduct independent and fair observation mission in our country. This is why we rejected their visa application.
Bunun uygun görülüp görülmemesi o ülkelerin ve sizlerin takdiri, ama hiçbir ülkenin milletvekilinin, parlamenterinin bir başka ülkenin iç işleriyle alakalı tarafgir bir tutum takınmasının da herhalde bütün heyetinde kabul edeceği bir şey olduğunu ve uygun görülmemesi lazım geldiğini düşünüyorum. Teşekkür ediyorum.
It is on sovereign decision to accept those observers within a country, but their impartial actions to that country must also be taken into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Salami Altinok. And then Peter Juul Jensen, head of the Danish delegation.
Yes, I would also like to say a couple of words here, because one of the parliamentarians who was not allowed to observe an election they were invited to was Danish. The other one was Swedish. Dear colleagues, we are all politicians. We are elected because we have opinions. It is not propaganda when you are pointing things out that could be a lot better in another country. That is politics. I think, one of the forces we have is when we act united. We have been acted united against what Russia is doing towards Ukraine. But we also need to act united when one country does not allow other countries' politicians to observe an election they were invited to. They cannot pick and choose who is allowed into their country, because we have all signed an agreement saying that we will work together in order to improve good governance, but also to observe one another's elections. So let's stand united and say, next time this happened, we will all stay away, because only if we are united, we can make a difference. Nobody should be able to pick and choose among us. We are all parliamentarians. We all have the same mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Juul Jensen. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Johan Büser, rapporteur of the third Committee and Deputy Head of the Swedish delegation. The floor is yours, sir.
Thanks a lot, Madam President, and I'm very happy that this discussion came up in this plena. I think these are basic values of a democracy, what it is, and if we go and observe elections, you have the right to do so as a parliamentarian, and you also have the right to express your views on different countries during the years before, but then when you're going as an election observer, you do it as a neutral part observing the election, and that is really important to stress. It's unacceptable that a country pick and choose, and I very much agree with what Mr. Juul Jensen said, and I'm from Sweden, and one of the Swedes were declined observing the elections, and out of a Swedish perspective, this is totally unacceptable. So I would like to thank the Madam President and Secretary General for clarification of what you have done. But for the future, I think that I agree what Juul Jensen said, that if countries start to pick and choose parliamentarians and not accept certain ones, we should not go at all, and we should stay as the whole organization. So I think this is an important discussion we should continue for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johan Büser. And just to mention that during the plena there will be also the report from the election in Turkey on the agenda. Any other comments on the President's report? I don't see so. Thank you. Then we go further on the agenda to number 4. The Financial Questions Report of the Treasurer of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Peter Juul Jensen. Number 4.1, Present Financial Situation and Annual Contribution. Mr. Peter Juul Jensen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. And I'll take point 4.1 and point 2 under the same issue. Dear colleagues, let me start by thanking you and your parliaments for all your support in these difficult times. And of course also a very special thanks to Hede Fry and the Parliament of Canada for hosting us here in Vancouver. Should we not give them a hand? You know, my motto since I was elected 4 years ago is time is money. So I'll go straight on to the main point. Our budget for the next financial year, which goes from 1st of October 2023 to 30th of September 2024. After being discussed in the Bureau, my proposal was distributed to the Standing Committee on 24th of May, so that all delegations have had enough time to consider it and ask questions before here in our meeting in Vancouver. I have not received any concerns during this time. I received just 2 days ago a letter from the head of the French delegation, which I appreciated. Colleagues, we are the political leadership, and it is our responsibility to ensure that the Parliamentary Assembly has the necessary means to operate. I have held extensive meetings with the International Secretariat, actually quite a few meetings, and also with the President and about the current situation, because many of these unpredicted challenges, they are a challenge to us. For your information, in brief, the draft budget includes an increase of 2%, but also quite hard savings. I would like to highlight a few of them. The first one, the budget includes a 3% increase in wages, primarily founded by major budget cuts to non-legally and non-contractually binding areas of the budget. Our Secretary General has promised to present a model for the regulation of these wages to the staff, and I'm looking forward to see this. The budget includes and introduces a 27% reduction in general administrative expenses. These savings are primarily delivered from a reduction of consultant costs. It also includes and introduce extensive cost reductions in the statutory meetings, starting with the annual session in Bucharest and all annual sessions held hereafter, as interpretation into 6 official languages shall be co-financed by the host and the International Secretariat. Furthermore, other cost-saving measures will need to be implemented and temporarily suspend translation of documents into some of the official languages. I would also like to point out that cost savings in this proposed budget are also derived from 78% decrease in cost associated with the Helsinki Plus 50 initiative, 8% decrease in cost associated with the Vienna office, and 15% reduction in the cost associated with the research assistant JPO programs. Dear colleagues, we are asking you to pay more, but we have also very carefully looked on how we are spending our money today, and that is why we can also say we are doing a lot of savings. It has not been easy, but I would like to thank the Secretariat with Gustavo in front for a very good cooperation and a lot of good ideas on how to make OSCE PA run a little further for every dollar. Dear colleagues, as you know, we have been now officially informed that the Russian Federation will not be paying their annual dues to the Assembly for this year. This has never happened before. This has never happened before, and therefore it creates a serious problem for our finances, as the Russian Federation is one of the biggest contributors of our Assembly. Almost 6% of our total budget is paid, or can I say was paid, by Russia. The governmental side of the OSCE in Vienna is unfortunately faced with the same problem. I don't have the final answer to this problem. On one hand, we cannot allow the Russian decision to interfere in the work of our Assembly for next year. The Assembly should not allow a single delegation to financially blackmail the organization and using funding as political tool of bringing disorder within the OSCE PA. On the other hand, we also have to be realistic. Our financial rule says that the organization must have emergency reserves that amount to 50%, moving to 100% of the total national contributions of the budget of a current year. When Russia doesn't pay their annual dues to the Assembly this year, the President and I have authorized the Secretary General to finance some of the expenditures from the emergency reserves. And if the situation doesn't change in the next financial year, we will have to finance some of our expenditures from the emergency reserves once again. But as you of course can understand, we cannot keep on going this way. Then we need to make some serious cutbacks. We have successfully approved a budget every last year for the last 30 years, and I'm sure that we will do that this year too. Let me conclude by mentioning the importance of hosting our meetings. As a treasurer, I'm most grateful to the Parliament of Armenia that will host our autumn meeting next year. Thank you very much, Armenia. Madam President, dear colleagues, as always, it is in my objective that the management of our budget reflects the efforts of all our parliaments to reduce expenses whenever we use taxpayers' money. Once again, thank you for your support and your cooperation. As you know, this is my last report to the Standing Committee as Treasurer. I have very much appreciated your support for the last 4 years. And I would like to conclude my report by saying to you, Madam President, thank you very much for your hard work. I have been working very close to you, and I have seen with my own eyes how many hours and how much hard work you have been putting into this organization. And thanks is only a small word when it comes to your big effort to make sure that this organization will stay above the water. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Juul-Jensen, our treasurer, for your report and for your kind work. But I would say it's thanks to your work with the financial situation that we are going forward on this issue. And you are handing over what you have done with warm hands to your successor, because I know as well that you had worked very, very hard with the financial situation. And it's not visible for everybody, but it's because our treasurer had worked so hard. Otherwise, it wouldn't have looked like this. So thank you. But now I will open the floor for comments. Is there any comments, questions? Yes, and now I will see here and make a speakers list. It was Austria, Gudrun Kugler, and then it's Lithuania and Vilja, and Cyprus and Germany. Anybody else?
Spain.
Austria, Spain, Latvia. It's 6. Anybody else? Not so far. I will put the question, if it's possible, 3 by 3 for the treasurer. And first on my list, I will put the questions 3 by 3. I hadn't pressed the microphone. And then give the floor to treasurer to respond. And first on my list is Ms. Gudrun Kugler, rapporteur of the second committee. The floor is yours, madam.
Madam President, many thanks. The Austrian delegation would like to thank our treasurer for his hard work over the past years. And we would also like to support what you have said regarding the contributions of the participating states to the OSCE PA. We have recently seen the numbers, and some are surprisingly low, and I think that many could contribute a little bit more and ease in the situation for OSCE PA. And that being said, I would like to draw your attention to one of the bullet points of the draft resolution of the second committee, in which we actually ask that the salaries of OSCE PA staff be evaluated according to inflation, to have regular raises. As much as I have been told, they haven't had a raise in quite some years. And it might also make sense to consider whether we can align the payment structure, the employment conditions of OSCE PA staff to those of other international institutions, because they have a worse situation, and I think that is not fair towards our staff. Our staff is doing great work, so it might be really meaningful to compensate them in a justified manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gudrun Kugler. Next speaker on my list is head of the Lithuanian delegation, Ms. Vilja Alkenati. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Lithuanian delegation also wants to thank Peter Juul-Jensen for his long-term job as a treasurer and has a question. You've mentioned about enlargement of the Vienna office and dramatically increased expenses for this office. As an old member of the OECPA, I remember that we always used to have Copenhagen office and ambassador in Vienna. And I want to ask you, was this intention to enlarge the Vienna office coordinated with you as a treasurer and with Madam President? And maybe you know what was the reason of this enlargement, especially because it was done during the COVID, when we used to have remote meetings. What does it mean in general?
Thank you, Ms. Vilja Alkenati. Next speaker on my list is Head of the Cyprus Delegation, Vice President Irene Charalambidis. The floor is yours, Madam.
Thank you so much, Madam President. I would like to thank Peter also for all his hard work. I'm also special representative on fighting corruption. And during Copenhagen meeting, I had some suggestions concerning the budget that I didn't see them taking, I didn't see that you have taken them into consideration. The main issue that I have already sent to you in written, it's about that the budget that is presented does not allow the Standing Committee to have analytical data concerning the expenses. And I specified it with mentioning, for example, the sum of 1,605,288 for salaries, total 2,956,934 for salaries and staff expenses. That provides no information about the number of persons employed or any other information regarding their salaries and benefits. And the same goes for staff travel and lodging. And I think that this, in the next budget, should be analytically written down. And in my humble opinion, the budget of an organization like OSCPA should always be accompanied by a detailed justification and a description of the proposed expenditures. This is necessary for those called to approve the budget, that is the Standing Committee, so that we are able to understand what the numbers in the proposed budget represent and how they have been calculated and why they have been deemed necessary for inclusion in the budget in order to be able to assess their reasonableness and make an informed decision. And the Standing Committee is fully responsible legally for the vote it gives to the budget. And I have to say, Peter, you are a very, very dear friend. You know that I'm one of your greatest fans. But I do not appreciate, in the response you send me, the reference that Cyprus is donating 7,929 to a total budget of over 4 million euros. How much the contribution of each country is has nothing to do with the transparency that an organization must have. And I have to say that being a vice president of this organization, my parliament contributes thousands and thousands of euros. I mean, the first 6 months of this year, I had to travel to 7 different destinations. I was in Washington participating on behalf of this organization for the World Bank Forum. And last year, my country organized one, as Roberto admitted, best conferences ever of OSCPA. So this reference in your response about the donation, the contribution of my country, I don't think it was appropriate when I was asking for transparency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Irene Charalambidis. And now there is 3 questions, so I will give the floor to Treasurer Peter Juliansen.
Yes, thank you. And I'll take them as they were asked. First, to my Austrian colleague. Yes, I agree. We have to take very good care of our staff. Without a very good staff, without a very experienced staff, without a staff that knows the world, this organization is not worth very much. And that's why we have to take very good care of our staff. But we also have to be honest to ourselves, saying that we will never be the leading organization when it comes to paying the highest wages. But we can make sure that we have decent working conditions and decent wages. And that is also why I'm asking all of you to pay a little bit more. But I hope also that you notice that we are making a lot of cut downs. We are taking out all the unnecessary fat of this organization. But I have to be honest also, there is no more fat in this organization. Then we have to make some serious reforms if we want to make sure that we don't want to pay anymore and we have a sustainable financial side. The reason why I recommended that we paid our staff a raise was, as far as I know, they have not received a raise since 1990. If anyone has other information, please correct me, but I think we are back in the 90s. So I think, it is about time that they got a raise, also because living cost has increased a lot since 1990. Just look at your own wages. But I agree with you, our staff is very, very important. To my friend from Lithuania, yes, the Vienna office has grown a lot. But that was also because that we in the standing committee was agreed upon to put the ship called Helsinki Plus 50 in the water. So we actually asked the Secretariat to work a little bit more, but we did not provide the necessary funds. But now you can see we are cutting away some of these positions, some of those money. So it will be a challenge for the Secretary General to live up to what we expect if we don't provide the funds. And of course, our office in Vienna has at several occasions been the center of discussion and will of course still be it, because it is not mentioned in our rules that we need to have also a secretariat in Vienna. The Copenhagen office is mentioned in the rules. The Vienna office is supposed to make sure that our ambassador in the council can get the help he or she needs. But I think also, and I agree with you there, the Vienna office has become a little bit too big. But I'm sure that in the years to come, we have to take a serious discussion about that. But it will just not be with me as a treasurer. I hope it answers your questions. The last question, Irena. I am so sorry if I have answered you in a way that upsets you. It was not my intention. Perhaps it's because English is not my mother tongue. The reason why I wrote that with the size of the Constitution is there is an old decision within the OSCE that we would like every country who paid less than 10,000 euros to pay a little bit more. So the least amount you can pay is 10,000 euros. That was what I meant when I wrote it. If I have made some mistake, I'm very sorry, because I know both with your great work and with the conference you made with transparency, you put a lot of energy and a lot of money into the OSCE. So if I had formulated it wrong, I'm very, very sorry. It was not my intention. It was not my intention. But I totally agree with you, and you know that this organization is a spokesman for good governments, and therefore we have to be transparent. And I would say that we can decide how we want our budget put together. We can decide on how many information the Secretary General is supposed to give us. But every time we have demands to the staff, to the Secretary General, he needs to allocate hands, and then we will drive our expenditures in the air. So we need to be very, very careful. But I hope very much that the new treasurer and the new president and the new bureau, they will take the time that is needed to look at the organization. Because in my 4 years as a treasurer, I have heard a lot about people thinking, and maybe they're right, that they don't get enough information. They cannot see how we're spending the money. When the new bureau are going to have their first meeting, I will hope that they will take a time to discuss what expectations do we have to the Secretariat, to the Secretary General, and to the Treasurer, but also the financial reports, so we will get it in the way we would like it, because OSCE PA is our organization. It is not the Secretariat's organization or the Secretary General's organization. This is the politicians' organization, and we can get it right the way we want it. All we have to do is ask for it and pay for it. Yes. I hope that answers your questions, Madam.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter Juul-Jensen. And now I will go further on the speakers list. Next on my list is acting head of the German delegation, Ms. Daniela de Ridder. The floor is yours.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, für die Worterteilung. Auch ich möchte mich im Namen der deutschen Delegation bei Peter Juul-Jensen für den Bericht, aber auch für seine wertvolle Arbeit bedanken. Lieber Peter, Sie haben in Ihrem Bericht deutlich Transparenz hergestellt über die Enge unseres Budgets. Und das wird natürlich auch die Arbeit des zukünftigen Büros und die nächste Legislaturperiode beeinflussen. Ich will deshalb noch mal deutlich den Appell unterstreichen, der auch an uns hier als Delegierte gegangen ist, einer moderaten Steigerung des Budgets zuzustimmen. Ich glaube, das ist absolut notwendig. Und wer sich die absoluten Zahlen anguckt in diesem transparenten Bericht, wird sehen, dass die Steigerungen durchaus akzeptabel sind. Ich glaube, dass es schon deshalb wichtig ist, diesem Folge zu leisten, weil wir uns von Russland durch den Rückzug aus der Zahlungsverpflichtung nicht erpressen lassen dürfen. Und das ist, glaube ich, etwas, was wir sehr unterstreichen müssen. Ich will aber auch meiner Sorge Ausdruck verleihen, dass die Budgetkürzungen nicht zulasten der Wahlbeobachtungen, die wir ja eben hier auch noch mal ausdrücklich gutgeheißen haben, gehen dürfen. Die Wahlbeobachtungen kosten Geld, sie kosten auch Budget, was Staff angeht und ähnliche Organisationskosten. Aber wir haben eben schon mal diskutiert, dass die Wahlbeobachtungen ein Kernstück der OSZE-Parlamentarierarbeit sind. Und deshalb bitte ich darum, hier nicht zu sparen. Ich will ausdrücklich begrüßen, auch den Vorschlag von Peter Juul-Jensen, noch mal genau hinzuschauen. Das wird auch die Arbeit des nächsten Schatzmeisters oder der nächsten Schatzmeisterin sein, hier auch Empfehlungen auszusprechen, wo denn im Rahmen beispielsweise eines Business- oder Financial Audits Akzente gesetzt werden können. Ich glaube, das ist dringend notwendig, aber bitte nicht bei den Wahlbeobachtungen. Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Ms. Daniela de Ridder. Next speaker on my list is Vice President and Head of the Spanish Delegation, Mr. Pierre John Pons. The floor is yours, sir.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta, y muchas gracias a Peter Juul-Jensen por su trabajo. Algunas reflexiones, ¿no? En primer lugar, lógicamente, la delegación española va a dar apoyo y voy a repetir algunas de las reflexiones que hicimos en el Bureau Meeting de Copenhague. La primera es que creo que, como han dicho algunos de los otros intervinientes, y tú mismo, Peter, lo has dicho, necesitamos repensar de una forma transversal el futuro de la organización, su gobernanza, y por tanto, yo ya lo dije en el Buró, creo que tenemos que hacer una task force en el que haya miembros de los diversos parlamentos, más miembros del secretariado, que analicen a fondo el futuro. Pero quiero ligarlo con una reflexión que creo que un poco está flotando en la sala. Es decir, la organización parlamentaria como tal, sus operaciones son sobre todo sus operaciones en el terreno, las observaciones electorales. Por tanto, la organización del secretariado, las oficinas de Copenhague o de Viena, tienen que ser un espejo de esa operacionalidad. Si las operaciones crecen, nuestras oficinas pueden tener una capacidad de respuesta de acuerdo con esas. Lo que no podemos tener es una rebaja operacional, como ha dicho la compañera de Rieder, y mantener tal cual las oficinas. ¿Cuál es nuestra apuesta? Hay que incrementar efectivamente las contribuciones, hay que reflexionar sobre cómo mejoramos la operacionalidad, y yo me sumo a lo que decía Gudrun y a lo que hemos dicho siempre, y también lo hemos dicho en todas las reuniones. Yo creo que esta delegación considera que somos una organización muy profesional, que sus documentos tienen un valor importante, pero necesitamos que estén también en el terreno, y por tanto tenemos que buscar nuevas fórmulas para incrementar las contribuciones. Y hay que pensar en grande, y por supuesto el blackmailing de Rusia hay que denunciarlo permanentemente. Muchas gracias, Peter, por la labor.
Thank you, Mr. Per-John Pons. Next speaker on my list is Head of the Latvian delegation, Mr. Richard Cools. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Jensen, for your report. I will just continue what my colleague from Lithuania actually asked, and somewhat I didn't hear, direct answer from you on her raised question. When it comes to Vienna office and Copenhagen office, by the size, it seems they're very equal. It means, in my view, in my understanding, that the OEC Parliamentary Assembly somewhat has two secretariats. So with this, I question how many more organizations, international organizations, there are in the world that have two secretariats. With this saying, well, the size obviously has increased. Obviously, the salaries also has to be increased. How much in percentage-wise does the Vienna office cost the OEC Parliamentary Assembly, both the staff salaries, the rent of the office premises, in percentage-wise? How much chunk of it makes from the overall budget? And with this, obviously, you mentioned the 6% financing that is, well, missing right now due to the Russia's not willingness to pay its dues. And is it feasible to continue to have two offices? What is your view as a treasurer, as a logic of flow of finances, particularly when there is a struggle with financial access? When it comes to increase of the contributions from the member states, obviously I'm absolutely ready to advocate that back in my country, if there is a utmost transparency in existing expenditure, and their answers to raised questions are answered not in just shadily, vaguely, but very directly with the numbers backing it and arguments why we are sustaining one or another office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richard Cools. And by this is 3 questions asked, and I will give the floor to Peter Juliansen. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President. First, to my colleague from Germany, actually, as a Dane, it is very good to be praised by a German when it comes to finances. In Denmark, we have always looked with envy on how you are running your economy. and we're very dependent on it. So when a German politician praised me for the way I'm handling finances, I become very proud. Thank you very much. And if you could put it in writing. No. I agree with you very much. Our election missions, that is actually this organization's crown jewel. We have a tool where we can put together a bunch of people and go observing how democracy is working in all of our countries. At the end of that, we can stand up on a podium, invite all the press, and give our recommendations, give our good advice how to make a good country even better, how to make sure that everybody in a democracy has a voice. Our election missions is our crown jewel. And that is also why in this budget we are actually allocating further funds than we did in the last one. So we are not cutting down on our crown jewel, we are making it even bigger. But when it comes to election missions, we cannot go there by ourselves. We need to go hand in hand with ODIHR. And the ODIHR has the same problem as we have. Inflation, war in Europe, a big country who will not pay anymore. But they also have a mechanism within their staff saying that they should be compensated for inflation. We don't have that. So they get less and less money to take care of their crown jewel, the election observation missions. And when a big country, Russia, is blocking for further initiatives in order to make sure that the ODIHR have a sustainable budget, they cannot do so many election observation, and that is why we don't have so many. We cannot have the same setup as ODIHR. We do not have the same contacts. We do not have the same experience. We are the Indians. We are the people on the floor going out there, looking, asking, helping, observing, and they have all the structures behind. Does that make sense? I hope so. But, you know, I totally agree with you. Our election observations are very important. Yes, and the last question. Yes, good advice. Oh, Ponzi left. I'm an outgoing treasurer. I think, you know, it would not be very helpful for my successor if I came with good advice. We have a very, very good possibility now. The president and a lot of other good people have been working very, very hard to get a business audit. Can you remember when we started talking about that? Most of you were against. Now, I think, you know, most are for a business audit. We get new eyes on the organizations. We get new eyes on how we are doing things. We will get a new president. We will get a new treasurer. If they are smart, together with a new bureau, they will use the first 1, 2, 3, 4 months to take a very carefully look at the whole organization in cooperation with the Secretary General. And they will turn every rock and see how can we make this organization a little bit better? How can we make sure, even though we are not paying the highest wages, that we have good working conditions for our staff? How can we perhaps make a good staff even better? Think if we had the money to say to Luke, there is this course at a good British university. We think it would be very good to you, then you can help us improve this organization. We are a company without means to educate our staff. There's a lot of things we can do even better. but we just need to make sure that the next president has his or her back covered in the organization. Margareta, she has tried, she has really fought very hard. And I've been sitting in the first row to watch this, but we need to make sure that we also have the will and the courage to make this organization a bit better. And that is why my motto is not only time is money, it's also how can we make a good organization even better. And then about the Vienna office, I'm sorry, I cannot those figures by my fingers, but you know, I think we all agree upon that the Vienna office has become, I would say a lot. It has become bigger during COVID, and that was because we had to arrange our meetings in a different way. We have not had the political courage to cut it back when the COVID stopped, but also because we have taken in new tasks. And the Secretary General, of course, you know, he has also improved the numbers of staff. I think, you know, it would be only fair to let Roberto say a couple of words afterwards. But in my eyes, the Vienna office must not be as big as the one we have in Copenhagen. The Vienna office has, in my eyes, the primary task to support the ambassador when he is working with the council. And maybe if we have difficulties making sure that we can pay our bills, we should ask one of our countries, could the ambassador and a couple of employees for a short moment move into one of our embassies so we can save those kind of money in Vienna? I don't know. But I don't think, you know, the cost for a Vienna office will help this organization alone. But that was just an idea, but I should also be very careful because I'm outgoing. So I need to walk very carefully. I hope you understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter Juliansen. I just would like to say here, we are supposed to end the Standing Committee 12:30. Then there is a lunch break and the General Assembly. It's the opening ceremony. There is speakers involved. There is also national leaders from this area, and it should start 3 o'clock sharply. So I do kindly ask you to be very brief. I don't want to put the line for the length to speak, but dear heads of delegation, please try to be very brief. If there is a need, it's of course possible to lengthen the Standing Committee, but then you will have a shorter lunch break because the General Assembly starts at 3 o'clock. I just mention it so you know about the situation. Then I have, as it looks now, the final round. And the first speaker on my list is head of the Swedish delegation, Mr. Björn Söder. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I want, on behalf of the Swedish delegation, to thank Peter for great work as our treasurer. Our assembly is facing the worst challenges since its founding to contribute to an end of the Russian full-scale war in Ukraine and to promote a tribunal tasked with investigating war crimes perpetrated in Ukraine are the most important matters we have to deal with now in the near future. We are an assembly full of political initiative and activity. To be able to do this in the very best way, we will have to make serious and thorough priorities within the assembly and the secretariat. I fully support the suggestions on making an integrated performance audit in order to ensure that our resources are managed in the most efficient way, but also that our political decisions are being followed. I want to express my full support for the suggested performance audit of our secretariat. This is a basic tool for evaluation management in other parliamentarian organizations, and I will closely follow that these tools come into place, no matter which political leadership or senior officials we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Björn Söder. Next speaker on my list is head of the Netherlands delegation, Ms. Farah Karimi. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I would like also join my other colleagues in thanking Peter very much. You have done a great job, Peter, and also the report that you presented now, after having had quite some discussions, it is really applaudable. So you make very clear what the challenges are, you make very clear how tight actually our financial situation is, and you make also suggestions how to move forward. So I think it is really a very clear picture that you present to the Assembly. So I would like really to thank you for that. And I agree with also everybody else saying, you know, we have an Assembly based on contributions. That's actually the source of income. We are not selling cookies or anything else to provide actually resources for this organization. The contributions, that is the source of our income. And it has to also cover the expenses. And the expenses for that, we all together politically are responsible because we want this Assembly to do things that we think are relevant. And again, I join everybody else saying election observations are really key for our Assembly. I mean, the pace, we have this idea being leading on that, and rightly so. Because of also us being part of the OSCE, being connected to ODIHR. But this year we had 2 election observations and PACE had 6 election observations. And I think it becomes a little bit difficult to keep this, you know, idea of being the leading organization if you don't deliver. We have to deliver on that. And at the same time, when I see how the budget is tight, I think we can't ask to deliver on that without also delivering on our contribution. So this is really the reality that we have to face. So this is the first point that I wanted to make. The second point is my really big concern on the Russian contribution, that we are going to face the challenge of losing Russian contribution that will create a gap. And I was listening carefully to you, Peter, and you said that you and the President authorized actually the Secretary General to use our reserves for that purpose. I can understand that for time being, and I think I can actually support that on behalf of the Dutch delegation, but I would really request for the winter meeting that the Treasurer to come and the Secretary General represent a plan how we are going to deal with that gap, which is not going to really eat all of reserves, because that's not what the professional organizations do. So we have to address that one. And then when it comes to the implementation of an integrated business and financial plan, which I, again, welcome very much, I think the points that you have now actually made as this is going to be the agenda for this integrated financial and business plan gives us a very good tool, the results of that, really to think about the professionalization of the organization for the next level, and also for the contribution which is needed. And I think this is going to be the tough political message that we have to share it with each other, and we have to have the discussion about it, so how we are going to really respond to the outcome from that integrated, audit plan. And finally, I think without staff, without motivated staff, without people who also earn what they deserve, because we know the people. I mean, you know, half of them sitting there and most of them going around. We know them all with a name. We count on their support. And they deserve actually to be treated fairly and in a professional way. So in that sense, I think it is just important. This increase that you are suggesting, I think that's fair. And again, we have to have a good discussion about working conditions and also how we are actually treating our staff. So thank you again. Thank you for you Peter, for your work. Thank you, Madam President, for your support. It has been always very great. And also thank you to Secretary General and the staff for their really fantastic work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Farah Karimi. Next speaker on my list is Head of the France delegation, Mr. Pascal Deschamps. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Tout d'abord, je me joins à tous mes collègues pour remercier le travail énorme de comptabilité et de secrétariat financier qu'il faut faire pour réaliser de tels budgets. Et puis remercier tout particulièrement Peter pour la réponse rapide qu'il a faite à la lettre peut-être tardive de mon collègue Didier. Je voudrais seulement revenir sur un point comptable ou une équation qu'il faut qu'on prenne tous en compte. D'un côté, on a un budget proposé avec une augmentation de 10% des RH, dont 8% du personnel, qui fait suite à une augmentation de 5% l'année dernière. Les chiffres ont été très bien précisés en valeur absolue par Irène. De l'autre côté, ce qu'a dit ma collègue de Vienne, il est légal, normal d'augmenter les salaires en proportion du personnel qu'on veut avoir. Et la troisième partie de l'équation, c'est oui, on veut continuer à faire de l'observation de qualité et peut-être même la développer. Bon, ça, c'est à nous de réfléchir politiquement là-dessus. De cette équation, le seul paragraphe, à mon avis, qui manque dans la réponse de Peter, écrite à la lettre de Didier, c'est comment on fait une augmentation de 5-8% et que parallèlement, on n'augmente pas le personnel. Ça signifie que cet écart, c'est un recrutement supplémentaire, un peu les chiffres qu'a évoqué Irène. Combien de personnes ont été recrutées de manière supplémentaire pendant cette période et où? C'est un peu ce paragraphe qu'il aurait fallu. Tout ça dans un contexte où, bien évidemment, on veut maintenir ce travail absolument fantastique que j'ai eu l'occasion de faire par 2 fois cette année et qui est indispensable à la crédibilité, finalement, de la politique et de la démocratie dans notre monde. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Pascal Deschamps. Next speaker on my list is head of the Irish delegation, Mr. Michael Cred. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And on behalf of the Irish delegation and on my own behalf, I'd like to thank the executive for the work that they do. I just have 6 specific questions with regard to the figures presented to us that I would appreciate some clarity on. I note in the budget figures for 2022-2023, there's a figure included of 15,000 for audit fees, accounting and consulting. I just have a specific question as to whether this is an internal audit or whether we have external auditors, and if in the audit of the accounts for 2022-23 there are any notes from our auditors. I note that also in respect of the same subheading on general administrative expenses, there's a fee in 2022-23 of 96,000 euros, I presume, for external consultant, legal and procedural advisor, I think is the full title, which in the proposed budget for 23-2024 has dropped to 26,000. Could I get some detail regarding what the implications are of a cut of that magnitude and what in fact has money been spent on in respect of external consultant fees? My third question relates to the research assistant program and junior professional officer, which is another area where there's a pretty significant budget cut between 2022-2023 and the current financial year. I'd just like to know more about what that program is and what the implications are of the cuts. A fourth question is with regard to salaries. Apart from the figure of 1.482 million euros, there's no detail, obviously, in this document of specific salaries, but just one question. Are all of the salaries of OSCE staff paid for by the OSCE from contributions from member states? Or are some staff seconded from other international bodies and wages paid by member states or by other organisations? It's just some clarity, because like in a document of this nature, I appreciate you can't get every detail on a note as brief as this. Could I ask, in respect of the Russian contribution, which it looks like we will not receive for the current financial year, whether the executive has given any consideration to what that means in respect of participation by Russia in the OSCE Forum, Parliamentary Assembly, etc., going forward? It does appear to me to be the elephant in the room in respect of how we go forward in that regard. I think the benefit of their participation is that we can tell them no holds barred what we think of their actions in Ukraine and elsewhere. But whether they should be allowed to continue to participate when they don't pay, and I suspect the reason why they won't pay is in an attempt to silence the OSCE. That's something I think which we have to give serious consideration to. And my final question is with regard to the Helsinki Plus 50 initiative, and the subhead there sees in 2022-23 a HR expenditure of 48,000. And in the current year, 23-24, no expenditure under that heading. Just like to know what the consequences are of that cut in budget as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Cred. And this was the last question. And then I will give the floor to our treasurer, and after that to the secretariat. So please, Mr. Treasurer, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for your questions. Yes, and I'm very glad you're going to, after I'm finished, you hand over to Secretary General, because he has many of the answers. First of all, I would like to say to Björn, I agree with you. Thank you for your statement. And to Frima Kai, I think, when PACE can do 6 observation missions, and we have only done 2, we are only, as far as I know, going up on observation mission where ODIHR also is present. And I think, that is very, very smart of us, because otherwise we would have A and B observations. I think, this organization, whenever we put on our boots and head into the field and to another country to make an observation, everybody must know that we are doing it in a good and fair way, and we are turning every stone to see what is hiding beneath it. I think, PACE, as far as I know, they're good, nice people also, like us, but they don't always get all the way down. ODIHR does fantastic work, and that is why it is value for the money whenever we go out with them. And I'm very glad that we have managed to have such a good relationship with the ODIHR. So the OSCE, PA, and ODIHR are standing side by side every time we go out. I think there's a lot of quality in that. Pascal, the Secretary General will answer all about staff. Yes. And to my Irish colleague, of course, every time we spend money here, there is an external auditor who makes a report, and it is presented in the Bureau. And I also think it is available on our home page, so you can see any comments. In my time, and it is not because of me, I haven't heard, also when I was just a member of the Standing Committee, I've never heard any criticism, but it is my assessment that the auditor is very thorough, very thorough. But of course, they only do things in order to make sure that the OSCE are living up to a Danish law principle system. And of course, if we want to have anything more, we have to pay for it. And that is also why I think it's a very good idea that we have a business audit, an extended audit in the years to come, because then it also gives us a possibility to look a little bit deeper within the cupboards to see if there's anything we can do better. But I think the financial sides, I can say with every assessment we have got from the auditor that everything is run by the book and in a good and fair way. Number 2 and 3, how can I say this? Because I have already offended our colleague from Croatia today, and I didn't mean to. There's a reason why I sent my report out by the end of May. There are a lot of questions I don't have them in my small head. And that is why every time I have made a speech, I have asked you, if you have any questions, please put them forward to me in writing, because I don't want to give a wrong answer. I don't want to give a wrong answer. Yes, normally I'm a politician, but dear friends, you are my colleagues. And that is the reason why every answer I would like to give to you, I would like it to be the truth. And I cannot remember all the questions. But please, if you will put them forward in writing to the Secretariat, you will have correct answers all the way. I'm sorry, I cannot get it closer. But I think, you know, we have to help one another and make sure that whenever we are having some kind of responsibility towards each other, we ask the questions in right time and in a way where we have a fair chance to find the answers. Because right here, I'm caught on my left foot.
Thank you. Any more?
No, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Excellent. And now I will give the floor after consultation with the Secretary General. He suggested that I should give the floor to Deputy Secretary General Gustavo Payares, who is responsible for the finance in the Secretariat.
Yes, Madam President, maybe Gustavo will integrate
Yes.
some of the things I will say, and we'll try to answer some of the questions. I must say, first of all, congratulations, Peter. You have, I think for the first time in the history of the Parliamentary Assembly, we've had such an extensive debate on the Treasurer's report, and this is good because there is more request and scrutiny for what is put there in the figures. And I must say, you have actually indeed covered and answered most of the questions. I was going to touch upon also the budget in my report later, Madam President, but as you're asking that I give some clarifications on some of the things.
Yes, please. I think it's proper to have it now because we are going for the decision later,
Okay.
and not later, and we are soon running out of time. So please, Secretary General.
Okay. Well, let me say first, election observation mission is some issue that has been touched upon a lot, and I agree with you. This is the crown jewel of the Parliamentary Assembly. It's normally the biggest chunk of our budget, and I think the election observation mission needs to be beefed up also in the future. We have created a department who deals specifically with that. I think we've become extremely professional in the way we organize our election observation missions. We receive normally feedback from members who participate in these observation missions saying that they appreciate the product we managed to put together. The decision of which countries we go to observe an election is a political decision. Of course, it's not an administrative decision of the Secretariat. The way also in the election guidelines, the way they've been produced is that the President makes a proposal, informs the Bureau, of course in consultation with the Secretariat also to see what kind of resources the Secretariat has available in order to services parliamentarians who observe elections. So, but I just want to underscore the fact that the final decision on whether we go in a country or not is mainly a political decision, and so it should be, of course. There's been a lot of questions about also the Vienna office and the change of premises that happened a few years ago. Of course, also this was a decision made by the political leadership in a standing committee. First of all, the establishment of the office in Vienna was a decision of the standing committee many years ago, and the move of the premises of the office from where it was before in a small apartment into a more professional office was a decision based on a proposal of the Treasurer at that time to increase the premises of the office. The staff has slightly increased indeed from 2015. I was actually myself, before becoming Secretary General, a member of the Vienna office. We were 5 when I left Vienna and moved to Copenhagen. Now there are 7 permanent staff, so it has slightly increased. The ratio, I think, think it's 7 in Copenhagen, 7 in Vienna, 18 in Copenhagen, and of course this is not an additional office. I mean, it's a peripheral office of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, which is headquartered in Copenhagen. But it's important for you to have a sense of what are the activities that are carried out in the office in Vienna. And where these activities have been triggered from, because they are not activities that the Secretariat suggests. The activities of the parliamentary assemblies are normally deriving from a decision of the plenaries. When you make resolutions, you say we should work on migration, we should work on a number of issues. So the political leadership indicates what are the areas where you would want to work. And so then the Secretariat adapts itself and tries to put resources to cater for the political decisions made by the plenary. So the main drivers of activities are the plenary, the standing committee. The standing committee normally makes decision to the establishment of the ad hoc committee on migration, the establishment of the ad hoc committee on fighting against terrorism. So the standing committee also makes a political decision to start an activity, and then the Secretariat accompanies that political decision by finding staff in order to support the parliamentarians. And the third, let's say, promoter of activities is the President. The President decides to appoint special representative, decides to carry out some activities, and therefore the Secretariat follows that political decision of the President by providing resources to cater for that political decision. So just to give you a snapshot, the office in Vienna deals with one institution, the second committee. So Marco Bonabello is here, is the director of the second committee, which will meet actually in this room in these days. In Vienna, we have the committee to fight terrorism, which was a decision made by the standing committee, and so it's run. Too fast, okay, sorry. It's a committee that was established by the Standing Committee, and Mr. Reinhold Lopatka is in Vienna, and our office supports his activities in Vienna. In Vienna, we also have the person who deals with South Caucasus portfolio. So all the activities on the South Caucasus are run from Vienna. All the activities on Western Balkans, Southeast Europe, are run from a project manager who is based in Vienna. The gender portfolio that supports Eddie Fry is the project manager who deals with gender is based in Vienna. The special representative of South Caucasus, so we have also, this is a repetition, I think. The special rep and the portfolio, exactly, are both based in Vienna. Then there is a special representative on corruption. So the person who supports the special representative on corruption is also in Vienna. But to say also why recently it has increased is because the main portfolio, Ukraine, is run by a person who is in Vienna. Ambassador Panchevsky deals with the portfolio in Ukraine, which has become one of the central activities of our assembly, also because in Vienna every week there is a permanent council that deals with the Ukrainian situation. So every day there are meetings around Ukraine, and so our office there supports the person who deals with the biggest portfolio, which is Ukraine. And plus, yes, there is the old traditional activities that was before carried out by Ambassador Notelle, which is represented the Assembly in the Permanent Council, in the committees, liaison with the institutions and the Secretariat. So this is the plethora of activities that this office does with 2 human resources in addition to those that were there in 2015, but with a number of activities which were not there before. And the list of activities are activities decided by the Standing Committee, the plenary, and the President. So just want to underline that. Also underline on the Vienna office, the premises of the Vienna office are paid by Austria. Austria pays half of the offices in a donation that they have increased. Austria has tripled its donation to the Parliamentary Assembly by paying for half of the offices that we have. And Germany also pays for a staff member, so it's not paid for. I'll try also to answer some questions from Ireland. You asked about the 15,000 euros that were in the audit fees in the old budget, and indeed we will, hopefully, the Standing Committee will decide now to increase those those resources to integrate the old financial audit that we had together with a performance business audit. So you will see in the new budget that figure increasing, but in the old budget it doesn't contain it yet because it's a decision that has to be made right now. So hopefully this decision will be made. And you asked about, are the salaries paid by the OSCE budget? Yes, the unified budget of the Parliamentary Assembly pays for the salaries, but there is also three big contributors. Italy pays for one staff, Germany pays for one staff, and Turkey pays for one staff. So we also have extra budgetary contributions in the form of secondment for our staff. So some are paid by the main budget and some by extra budget contribution. What are the consequences of the Russian Federation not paying for our budget? The Treasurer correctly said, I've been authorized by the Treasurer and the President to move funds from our reserves to the current budget because the Russian Federation decided not to pay their contribution for the current budget cycle that ends on the 30th of September. So we are short of, Russia, mind you, is the second biggest contributor in this assembly. The US is the biggest contributor, and then comes Russia. So it's a big chunk of our budget which is missing, and therefore the President and the Treasurer have given me authorization to take it from the resources, from the reserves. But the consequence, political consequence, is that they have no writing votes. They cannot vote, they cannot participate. Well, they would have not participated anyway for other reasons. They don't have visas. But also, if they were, they would not be able to cast a ballot or be elected to office because according to our rules, if you don't pay the contribution, this is the consequence of not paying for the dues. You've asked about the reduction in the human resource expenses for the Helsinki Plus 50. Indeed, there was a compensation for Ambassador Zanier, who is our consultant, who has carried out this project. Ambassador Zanier will still support us, but will no longer be on our payroll as a consultant from the 1st of October, and therefore we have sort of saved resources for his contribution. And I take also the advice from Irene Karalambidis on a more detailed budget in the future. For your information, I mean, the budget is always, we've kind of, since I became Secretary General, I've tried to also change a little bit the format and also present the old one and the new one so that you would have more information. And we tried to keep it on a one-pager, but of course we can be more detailed on lodging, on hotel fees, and it's a lot of information, and sometimes we are in between, do we give too much information and then they kind of get lost in translation, or do we just give the general, also because we're talking about, very minor figures sometimes, like, so, or we go break down to the last cent, and it's different schools of thought, but what we're planning to do, as it's been advised also by Vice President Pons, is indeed, with the new leadership, with the new treasurer, we will sit down and try to I have to finish. Okay. We will sit down and try to provide a more a diverse way in the next budget cycle to present the budget with more details. So, but thank you very much for the advice. I hope I answered some of the questions. But I must say, congratulations, Peter. You have really managed to give a lot of detailed answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. And by this, I find that the discussion on the budget, the present financial situation and annual contribution is done, and we will go further on to number 4.2, approval of the budget for 2023 and 2024, the financial year. And we will proceed as follows. First, I will ask the Standing Committee to approve the budget. Then I will ask the Standing Committee to approve the extra budgetary funding for an integrated financial business performance audit. And now to the adoption of the budget. Does the Standing Committee approve the budget for the financial year from 1st of October to 30 September 2024? I repeat, this vote is for the core budget, not the extra budget funding, which will be decided upon separately. So, do you, members of the Standing Committee, approve the budget? Anybody against? No, the budget is approved. Thank you. And now we will continue to consideration of the additional funding. Does the Standing Committee approve the extra budget funding of euro 18,000 for an integrated financial business performance audit? Do you, members of the Standing Committee, agree? Anybody against? The extra budgetary funding of the euro of 18,000 for an integrated financial business performance audit is agreed. Thank you, dear members of the Standing Committee, and thank you, Peter, for your work. It was really excellent and fantastic to work together with you and your responsibility. I think all of us could agree on this and applaud for Peter. But I would also like to say thank you, dear colleagues. I think it has been important for us to have this debate, even if it has taken some time. The financial situation is difficult, but it shows also with the debate about all the responsibilities that are here in the room among heads of delegations and members of the Bureau. So thank you for this. Let's go further on. Number 5, report of the chairperson of the subcommittee on the rules of procedure and working practice, Vice President Pascal Alisard, and consideration of proposed amendments to the rules of procedure. Unfortunately, Vice President Pascal Alisard is unable to join us here in Vancouver. And to present this item, a written report is available and has been circulated. I encourage all members of the Standing Committee to refer to it regarding the work of the Rules Committee since the beginning of this year. Let me simply note that following our discussions at the autumn meeting in Warsaw, I made several appointments to reinforce the Rules Committee and ensure that its proposal bringing the Standing Committee closer to consensus. The Rules Committee have had fruitful discussions during our winter meeting in Vienna. Since then, it has met several times online to discuss and refine various proposed amendments to the rules of procedure. Prior to this meeting, 3 proposed amendments were circulated for consideration. Relating to the first amendment, we have had some additional consultations in recent days. On the proposal of the original proposers, our friends and colleagues in Ukraine, we will not consider the first proposed amendment to Rule number 3 today. However, we will proceed with the second and third amendments, which propose to strengthen gender balance among appointments by the PA President and among ad hoc committee members, respectively. As you may recall, at our meeting in Vienna earlier this year, Vice President Pascal Alisard informed of plans to look at ways to strengthen gender representation. These proposals are now in implementation of the plan. Please note that earlier this week, I received a letter from the delegation of Belarus expressing opposition to all amendments on the table today. In the light of the limited time available for us today, and taking into account the extensive discussions which have already taken place in the framework of the Rules Committee, we will proceed as follows. I will give the floor to one member to move the second amendment. I will then ask the Standing Committee whether any delegation wishes to raise concerns about the amendment. If it becomes clear that the threshold to adopt a decision, consensus -1, is not achievable, I will close the consideration of the amendment and ask the Rules Committee to reflect this decision in its work. And we will proceed in the same way with the third amendment. And now, further on, with the formal consideration of the proposed amendments. We will now consider proposed amendment number 2 on strengthening gender balance in appointments by the President. And the head of the Cyprus delegation, Vice President Irene Charlambidis, have requested the floor. The floor is yours, Madam.
Thank you. I requested the floor because the amendments were my proposal to the Rules of Procedure Committee, Madam President, and I would like to say a couple of words. The two amendments aim to ensure a fairer gender representation in appointments made by the President of our Assembly. These amendments have been unanimously adopted by the Subcommittee on the Rules of Procedure, whose members I wish to thank most warmheartedly for the discussions we had. My particular thanks to the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Pascal Alizar, for his encouragement, as well as to Dr. Hedy Fry, who has long been steering our discussions on gender issues, for her support. Dr. Fry sets an example for all of us, and I would like to thank her for all the hard job she has done up to now. Dear colleagues, the balanced participation of women and men in decision-making has been high on the OSCPA agenda for quite some time. We have declared our willingness to support gender equality time and time again, and it has been reflected in numerous of our final declarations. As its 30th session, the OSCPA can show tangible progress in the area of equality. It is the time to show that we can lead by example, that our final declarations are not just rhetoric. In an institution like the OSCPA, women must be represented at each level of decision-making processes and positions. I strongly believe that we can only reach our full potential by joining forces. Certainly, there is still more to be done. Madam President, I also like to thank you personally, because during of your presidency, you have done that without any amendments, without any, you were not forced to, but you did it. And that shows how sensitive you are when it comes to this matter. I am confident that we can step up efforts so that this Assembly stays true to its commitments. I therefore urge you to adopt these amendments to the rules as per the proposal of the Subcommittee on the Rules of Procedure. Also, there is a new ad hoc committee for Ukraine, a committee that we must have. And I would urge everybody. There are women that have led by example during all our discussions in order to fight for Ukrainian friends, in order to fight for Ukraine. So we have 3 ad hoc committees with men as president. Now it's time to this crucial committee to have one of these women who have fought really for Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Head of the Cyprus delegation. And now I will give the floor to Dr. Hedy Fry, Special Representative on Gender. Dr. Hedy Fry is also head of the Canadian delegation. The floor is yours, Madam.
Thank you, President. And I want to echo what Irene just said, that Irene said, your strength, your ability to move this issue forward without any amendments is really important, and I want to thank you for all that. But I think it's important, if we're going to move forward and strengthen this organization and look at the issue of Ukraine, that we know that many of the people who are affected by the war in Ukraine, the majority are women, and we need a woman to head up that subcommittee or that organization so we can get to discuss the issues that are impacting women and children in this conflict. And so I would like to see, echo Irene's suggestion that we have a woman chair that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fry. And now I remind you that the delegation of Belarus had expressed objection in writing. Is there any other delegations who would like to raise concerns? No? Yes.
If I may.
Let's see. I don't see. UK, yes. Vice President Mark Pritchard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. And can I say I welcome this innovation by the Rules and Procedures Committee. When I wrote to all delegations back on the 18th of January in my reform and renewal proposals, many people said to me, it can never be done. Well, it shows you with the political and diplomatic will of this Assembly and with the strength of its members and character of its members that we can change this Assembly as and when required. So can I thank you and the Rules and Procedures team, including Sir John Whittingdale, my former colleague who's now in the government in the UK, and in particular the Ukrainian delegation who've led this as well. But can I just say to Dr. Heidi Fry and Irene's comments on Cyprus, I, as somebody who chairs the ad hoc committee on migration, I do think there needs to be greater gender balance across committees and across the whole of this Assembly. And I'm a sort of moderate centre-right politician, and perhaps sometimes we're pigeonholed for not thinking these things. My experience, both my mother-in-law and my wife, is that when you listen to women's advice in leadership positions or in the home in a domestic situation, the advice is good and you're probably likely to make better decisions. And for those of us who've travelled around sub-Saharan Africa, not represented in this organisation yet, people will know that if it wasn't for the women of Africa, that Africa would be in a lot worse place than it currently is. So can I completely endorse that we need more women in leadership positions based upon merit, skills and experience, not based upon patronage, but we need more women, and I endorse the Rules and Procedures report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mark Pritchard. And next speaker on my list is head of the Swedish delegation, Mr. Björn Söder. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. As we remember, it was quite a stormy meeting in Warsaw when we discussed the suspension paragraph last time. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank Mark Pritchard and the UK for coming up with a proposal which was sent out in January, and also thank you to the ad hoc committee who took that into consideration. So I think we have a really good proposal on the table this time, and I would really much declare that I'm very positive to it and approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Björn Söder. Our next speaker on my list is Mr. Richard Cools. But let me just say here that the first amendments on the suspension mechanism is not up for decision here because it's withdrawn in consideration with Ukraine. Yes. So it's number 2 and number 3 who are up for decision. And next speaker is Mr. Richard Cools. The floor is head of the Latvian delegation. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. I actually have the point of order. I really want to, if you can clarify where in rules of procedure there is stipulation that somebody who is not present can submit his vote in writing. Could you please clarify that? Because as far as I understand, the voting is on those who are present in the room, and I couldn't find any procedure that stipulates that somebody who is not present can vote in writing being absent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richard Cools. And when it comes to the rules of procedure, I will give the floor to Mr. Andreas Baker in the International Secretariat, as you are the expert of the rules of procedure. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I would say that typically it's a slightly different procedure when it comes to consensus-based decision-making. Our process on consensus-based decision-making is borrowed from the OSCE side, and that's very specifically in the rules. We have that process as long as the OSCE Ministerial Council takes that process. And in that scenario, it is not a vote in the traditional way that it's thought about of for, against, etc. It's a matter for the chair to ascertain, to determine if there is any objection. And if that has been determined by the chair, then that is that relates to the decision. There's no specific reference to physical presence or not.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Did that respond to your question, Mr. Richard Cool?
I don't know. If it's not in rules of procedure, it's hard to say, is it tradition? So, well, it has to be clarified because in the future, there's important votes and someone is just, for whatever reasons are not present and I submit in writing and that can obscure the process, one or another resolution. So I think we have to set very clear rules. What happens with those who are not present? Yes, they can, for notification, can let know our position is this and that, but it won't affect the overall result. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coles. I can just agree with you. I have asked the same question when it was for our autumn meeting, because in my view, it's the chairperson who determines who are in the room and who are able to vote. Then I got explained by the Secretariat and also from the procedural advisor that when there is a member of the Assembly who have expressed that they are against a decision and in written before the meeting, their position is clear. It's well known. They have paid a member fee. It's not like Russia. They haven't paid a member fee, so it's nothing to pay any attention to. Then they should be included in the consensus. And this is the practice on the governmental side, and it's the practice here. But I think you are totally right that this is an issue that needs to be clarified much better in the rules of procedure. And it's also exemplify that the rules are, sometimes it's good to have rules that's a little bit vague, but not always, because it gives unclarity for everybody. What does that mean? And it's not good when it comes to sensitive decisions. So I think I totally agree. It's an issue for the rules of procedure to go further on with. For the next President, for the next Bureau. Thank you. Is there anybody else who requested the floor? Yes, it's head of the Lithuanian delegation. Ms. Vilja Alkenati, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have heard that we have borrowed some rules from our governmental side. I would wish in the future to borrow better rules. At least the governmental side has been paralyzed because of these rules. They are not able even to agree on the future chair in office. And why we as parliamentarians should agree to be paralyzed as them are, I don't know. At least my electors in Lithuania are not ready to accept it. And if we speak about the profile of our organization, about authority of our organization, each such agreement to be paralyzed decreases the authority of the organization. When I will come back and ask for a 2% increased for budget, I can get the question, why should they pay for that organization? I already used to have such questions. I had no answer. I had some hope that we will be able. Moreover, that Pascal Alizar and subcommittee has made a huge job while finding compromise, taking into account all points of view. Although these points were quite different at the beginning. And the fact that we were able to agree on with no objections shows that a huge job has been done. But we allow Russia play games, so how do we look in the eyes of normal people who don't care about rules, procedures, borrowed rules, and all this blah, blah, blah. They are looking at what's going on the ground, what Russia is doing, what should Russia do else for us to be able to make the decision.
Thank you.
Kakhovka was already damaged.
We are on the agenda right now.
Yes, I'm agenda also.
Thank you, Madam. And I would say that we are not paralyzed. We have managed with something that the governmental side haven't. We have adopted a budget. Thank you for that. It's important. But now, I didn't find, when we go back to the formal consideration of the proposed amendments on number 2, on strengthening gender balance in appointments by the President, I didn't find anybody who spoke against. So this means that the amendment is adopted. And then we will go further on to the number 3 on strengthening gender balance in the membership of ad hoc committees. And yes, and I don't see that there is anybody who speaks against this. No, then it's adopted. Thank you very much. And then we go further on the agenda to number 6, consideration of a proposal to create a new ad hoc committee. Ahead of our annual session, the delegation of Ukraine has written to me to ask that the Standing Committee consider the creation of a new ad hoc committee for the Assembly to streamline efforts to assist their country for peace and respect for their territory. I agree that a more structured group bringing together a coalition of distinguished members rather than a collection of separate special representatives would be a more effective way to coordinate the OSCE-PA's action to support Ukraine, particularly now since the war has gone on for more than 1 year. It's time for us as a parliamentary assembly also to consider what can we do in another way, in a better way. The new committee would serve as a dedicated channel to interact with our Ukraine colleagues and ensure that their requests or needs are well considered and addressed in the Assembly's work. I would propose that the ad hoc committee have 2 co-chairs to ensure that Ukrainians always have a leading role in the committee, to ensure that the committee remains a functional and operational body. I would suggest we keep participation limit to a manageable number of members. Additional details regarding the committee's formal designation, leadership, membership, and work plans will be determined under the next President for the Parliamentary Assembly. In line with established practice, I will now invite the Standing Committee to pronounce itself to the concept. Does the Standing Committee agree to establish this new ad hoc committee on Ukraine? I don't see that anybody objects. So the Standing Committee have approved the creation of a new ad hoc committee on Ukraine. And now we are going to number 7, report of the Secretary General of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Mr. Roberto Montella, I will give the floor to Secretary General for his report. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I have distributed a written report a week ago, so I will limit myself to a few remarks and allow also for some questions or comments. But let me start with saying a big thank you to Eddie Fry and to Canada. Eddie, thank you very much for hosting us here. We have worked on this project since 2019, hoping that this would happen in 2020. Unfortunately, COVID got in the way. But thank you very much for hosting us here. Thank you very much for hosting in your city. Eddie, you are an iconic person in this Parliamentary Assembly with your fight for gender. I must say you have been an iconic person who has produced a lot of results and concrete results. During my tenure as Secretary General, I've served 2 presidents, female presidents. I think this is also the result of your work. We've had a gender-balanced bureau for a while. We've had gender-balanced election observation missions leadership, thanks to the appointment made by the President. We have a gender-balanced staff at the Secretariat. I think a lot of your historical battle in this Parliamentary Assembly have been met with a big success. So thank you very much, Eddie, for hosting us here, and good congratulations. We are in the city of Vancouver. We normally talk about this organization as an organization that stretches from Vancouver to Vladivostok. And some of us have been to Vladivostok. I don't know how many of you have also observed the election in Vladivostok. I've been privileged to be in Vladivostok as well. So I have now seen the stretch of this organization. I've served this organization for many years. And I must say that being here, it's also important in this historical moment to underline the vastity of our region. This is a very vast region that deals with a very important issue like security from a 3-dimensional point of view, but it's a region that is very diverse, and it was meant to be diverse from its founding fathers. We have many countries in this organization who are not like-minded, who have in 75 committed to some values, and unfortunately during the last years have violated these values, and of course need to be sanctioned. But it's a very vast organization. It's not an organization of regional groupings. Is an organization of 57 participating states, all of them with their own rights, all of them in this body, the Standing Committee, with the voting rights, so all of them count for 1 in this body. Of course, in the plenary, they count with the political majority, and I will get to the point made by Vilja in terms of how we can also politically respond to the challenges we have. It's been touched by you, Madam President, in your report and by others. Indeed, the OSCE is in a very difficult situation. This organization, for the last years, the organization, not the Parliamentary Assembly, but the organization as such, has not had a budget approved, has also seen mandate of field operations being curbed and not renewed. By the end of this year, there is a very big challenge for the organization because the mandates of the Secretary General of the OSCE, the mandates of the Director of the ODIHR, the High Commissioner for National Minorities, and the representative of the media are expiring. And in order to renew those mandates, you need consensus. And of course, when you play by the consensus rule, there can always be 1 country or 2 who can spoil the game. And unfortunately, there is more than 1 country who is spoiling the game and not allowing the organization to survive. So we have indeed a big challenge in the organization as such. But the good news is that the Parliamentary Assembly is very much alive. You mentioned, Madam President, that even by consensus today we've passed an important tool, the most important political tool, I would say, the budget. And we have managed to be remaining very active in the Parliamentary Assembly. And why is that? Why we are so healthy? We are so healthy because, of course, we have the participation, the enthusiasm, the leadership of politicians, but also because we have a great asset in this Parliamentary Assembly, which is the fact that we vote by majority. In this Assembly, and now you will start this afternoon in the plenaries, in the committees, we simply vote by majority. So we can make political statements, we can make anything by voting by majority. And I think this is an asset which we should never give up. We should make sure that all our positions, all our political opinions, our resolutions are highlighted and are brought forward also in the greater public because they are important, they are made by politicians who represent 1 billion citizens, and they can be made without anyone blocking them. So this is the great thing. On the Russia dossier, I mentioned this in Vienna, on the Ukrainian dossier, I would say. Since 2014, this Assembly has been having an impeccable track record on its political moves. Senator Benkardin is here. In 2014, he authored a resolution called Clear, Gross, Uncorrected Violation of the Helsinki Final Act by naming the country who has done those violations. And repeating, the Assembly has adopted every year, recalling that resolution of Senator Benkardin, and every year has, by majority, voted on the resolution. This is the biggest asset we can offer. The governmental side of the OSCE, since 2002, so in the last 21 years, has never managed to have a political declaration, because they vote by consensus. And so always there's been a country or two who have blocked. So the governmental side, since 2002, doesn't pass any ministerial political declaration, while this Assembly, until today, and I'm sure on the 4th of July, will pass plenty of resolutions, 15 supplementary items that today you have sent forward to the plenaries and the committees. So we'll pass political documents, which shows that the parliamentarians and the organization is very much alive. So we have a governmental side blocked, from a political and administrative point of view, in a parliamentary side, very much alive, and also from an administrative point of view, very much alive. You just passed the budget, you've passed a resolution also to have a little bit more of an additional business performance audit, also to increase scrutiny of the work of the administrative bodies. So these are very good signs that shows that the Assembly is successful. And it's finishing. Sure, we have time. I would like to congratulate all the parliamentarians for the work that they've done so far, and try to not to forget that this is our biggest asset. Today marks, we have 4 more days to the 4th of July, and I would say the 4th of July, Independence Day, also marks symbolically the end of a very difficult period for this Assembly. I think from COVID time, with the war also waged by the Russian Federation in Ukraine, we've gone through very, very difficult couple of years. It's been difficult. I've seen also in the relations between parliamentarians, in the relations between the administrative structure of the organization, sometimes the leadership, some challenges. I hope that from the 4th of July we enter into a new era where politics is at the center, where we focus on the political priorities, and where we also kind of de-emotionalize a little bit the challenges we've had in the last period. Some of you are also members for a long time, and you've seen different areas in this Parliamentary Assembly. There's always been a kind of, I would call it a family spirit within the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Parliamentarians have always been very friendly with each other, outside the official meeting rooms, have interacted with each other, also in very difficult times. I mean, it's not that only from the 24th of February 22 we've been in difficult times. We've been in difficult times also before. But the relations between parliamentarians were also in a sort of camaraderie, let's say. You know. But I sense in this last period also a little bit more of tensions, divisions, and I hope that the new leadership that is coming and are going to have responsibilities from the 4th of July. We're also trying to bring a little bit of more, diffusing tensions, de-emotionalizing a bit the relations, and focused on the political priorities. And I think we have, unfortunately, big political priorities ahead of us, and we have to really focus on those. On the budget, I can only say thank you very much. It's been indeed a very interesting debate. It's never happened before that we had so many questions on the budget. I'd like to thank Peter for your work that you've done on the budget, really to go to the nitty-gritty of all the budget accounts that we have. I am happy that the auditor last February released a very positive result on the financial health of our organization, and I'm very confident that the same audit also next February will come up with the same result. And the last word of thanks to the staff of the Parliamentary Assembly. It's been mentioned by many of you. The staff is the backbone of this organization. All of this happens because Gustavo and his team manages to come here earlier, set it up. All my colleagues here on the stage or behind the stage make sure that everything runs on time. So a big kudo and thank you for my colleagues who have done this work, as it's been mentioned by some of you, also sometimes in very difficult financial situations. Their conditions of employment are not the same as their colleagues in the UN or in the OSCE. Hopefully, with the new treasurer, we will try to strive, I don't know if from the first year, but we will try to also make a plan for the next 3-4 years to kind of also bring the conditions of employment of our staff at the same professional level as those of the UN and the OSCE. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I have on my screen that Mr. Richard Cools, head of the Latvian delegation, have requested the floor, as well as Richard Hudson from United States, head of the first committee. Mr. Richard Cools, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Speaking of anniversaries, actually today is one, in my view, very important anniversary, and it's the liberation of the Snake Island by Ukrainian armed forces. That is 1 year today. It's also very symbolic, I think. But coming back to the point of order, the agenda, well, thank you very much, Secretary General, for your report and responses thus so far. And as some in the audience are no doubt aware, I received a letter from you, Secretary General, following the last meeting in February, in which you expressed your displeasure with some of the comments I made during the February 24 Standing Committee session, even hinting that my remark could result in criminal proceedings. Following that, it was your decision not to make the recording of the committee session public, and is still not. I feel that in order to get to the bottom of the issues at the hand, situations like these necessitate honesty and openness. The principles and values of parliamentarism also necessitate such an approach. As a result, I'm bringing it up again to encourage you to comment, reflect, or explain your method of dealing with instances like this, as well as your guiding principles and approach to your tasks in general. The lack of transparency in a number of practices and choices casts a shadow over the OEC Parliamentary Assembly operations, and this shadow of doubt can breed a loss of confidence, undermining the core grounds for the OEC parliamentary existence. In addition to any comments you might give now, I'm waiting for your written answers to the questions I raised in my response letter to you, and please indicate when I might receive them. And Madam President, as you clearly stated opening this standing committee meeting, that this is a publicly recorded session, I encourage everyone in this room, whenever you take floor, do ask your colleagues sitting next to you or back home who are watching online, please record this meeting, because there is no guarantee that that recording, that part of the session might be missing and not available to the parliamentarians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richard Cools. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Richard Hudson from United States. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, it is great to be in person and to see each one of you. I'm thankful that we're successfully in creating the ad hoc committee on Ukraine. I also appreciate the comments of my friend Richard Coles and others reminding us that at this very moment, Russia is engaged in an illegal, genocidal war against one of our member states. And this assembly is overwhelmingly united on this issue. And we have an opportunity this week to come together and once again send a very united message that we stand against this aggression, this illegal act. And again, I'll use the word genocide. I know the concerns raised by Mr. Coles, I believe, deserve a fair hearing and a thorough response from the International Secretariat. I understand and share some of these concerns, and perhaps the Secretary General can address some of these matters now in this format. Perhaps there are other issues that need to be addressed in a different setting. What I do not understand, though, is how the Secretary General's efforts to discuss these issues and clear the air in person with Mr. Coles have been twisted into some kind of an indictment on the Secretary General's integrity. And I want to say publicly, and I want to say plainly, that the Secretary General has my unwavering support and my appreciation for the way he and the Secretariat have conducted themselves. And I would just say to my colleagues who may have not been here prior to the Secretary General assuming his position, he has brought a breath of fresh air to this organization. Prior to Roberto Montella taking this position, we didn't have the kind of transparency that we have now. The Secretary General has brought business practices in place that we didn't have before. He's brought unprecedented levels of transparency. The idea of having an audit in the first place came from this Secretary General. And so I applaud those efforts, and I would just ask those of us who maybe don't have this historical perspective to keep that in mind as we have these very important discussions. I think they are important. I think the Secretary General does need to provide some answers. But I would also say publicly what I've said privately to Mr. Coles and to the Secretary General, that I think having a face-to-face dialogue is important. And I would encourage Mr. Coles and the Secretary General, rather than firing letters back and forth that become public, that can be exploited by Russia and others to try to create a misperception that there's disunity in this organization, to try to exploit that to distract from the message of unity that we have continued to send, and will send again in this meeting, that we stand against Russia's illegal war. I would just ask that, we're an organization that is all about dialogue. I think I would just encourage my friend Mr. Coles and others, let's have dialogue with each other as well. And let's show each other the grace and respect. Again, I look forward to the Secretary General responding to these concerns. And I am very eager to start the plenary session this afternoon and begin these meetings, because I think once again, we're going to come together in a very strong and united way. The work we do is very important. And I value each and every one of my colleagues who are here today and your participation in this. And I thank you for giving me this time, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Richard Hudson. I have two more speakers on the list, and I just would like to announce that our interpreters will end their session at 12:30 sharply. So we will continue without interpretation after 12:30. Next speaker is Mr. Pierre-Joan Pons, the Vice President of the Assembly and Head of the Spanish Delegation. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam President, for giving me the floor. I will speak in Spanish, if you don't mind. En fin, voy a hacer un poco de zoom out. Mañana el presidente español abrirá el semestre europeo en Kiev para mostrar la unidad europea. Esto es lo primero que quería decir y, por tanto, me sumo a lo que ha dicho el apreciado Richard en su intervención, que además quiero manifestar también públicamente como jefe de la delegación española, a la que le doy todo el apoyo. Y sí me gustaría hacer una reflexión más global, y es que el diálogo, la discrepancia, la divergencia, creo que está totalmente normalizada en esta organización. Se puede tener todos los debates que queramos. Ahora, creo que tenemos que ser capaces todos de hacerse un poco de reflexión y tener que escuchar en esta organización que, por favor, nos grabemos los unos a los otros. Me parece que es, al menos, para que se lo hagan mirar los que lo han dicho. Y lo digo con sinceridad, creo que hay que ser, en algunos elementos hay que tener líneas rojas. Por tanto, como delegación, quería expresar primero que lo importante es que mañana estemos unidos en presidencia que empieza en Ucrania, en Kiev, que haya unidad también en un momento en que en Rusia, hoy el presidente Zelensky decía, a mí me quiere matar Putin, pero a Putin lo quiere matar todo el mundo, lo que expresa también una idea de unidad que hemos de defender. Y, por último, preservar a las personas, porque son personas también, sean de la nacionalidad que sean, que nos sirven y nos ayudan a hacer esta organización mejor, porque al final nosotros vamos a pasar, pero lo que queda es la estructura y la organización. Y a veces atacar a las personas lo que hace es erosionar a la organización. Me paro aquí. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Per John Pons. Next speaker on my list is head of the Danish delegation, Mr. Peter Juliansen. The floor is yours, sir.
Yes, thank you. Every time we meet, we say to one another, we are a transparent organization. If I heard it correct, there has been moved some video material from our home site, from the place where we can go and see what has been discussed. If that is correct, it is not okay. If that is correct, that is not okay. Because we are a transparent organization. It must be possible to go and see who said what, who had those opinions, who voted for that, and who voted against. Otherwise, we only use transparency when we want to praise one another. These organizations are built on some principles of good governance, transparency, and fairness. Let's also have those three words in this room. I would like to hear, have there been removed any video material from our home site? And how is this possible? And Madam President, were you aware of this? Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Juul-Jensen. I will give the floor to Secretary General, but I will first respond on your question. I am not aware about this. I am not aware about the removing of the homepage. And now I will give the floor to Secretary General.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you very much for the remarks. In the spirit of Richard Hudson, I'd say that I would definitely welcome a face-to-face discussion to clarify and to clear the air, and not to do this, on Twitter or in the public domain, not creating wedges or doubts on the credibility of our organization outside. But let me just walk you through what has happened since Vienna, so that some of the misunderstandings, I think, that have happened in this exchange of letters can be clarified. When we were in Vienna, at the standing committee in Vienna, you, Mr. Kolz, made some remarks. You were asking about some of the stuff of the Vienna office, like this. The president, I must say correctly, immediately intervened, wanting not to let you finish what you were asking the question, because you were starting to name names of OSCPA staffers. But I somehow, in a spirit of full transparency, a word that is very often used here, said no, but you should let the member of parliament speak, because they shouldn't be not allowed to ask questions, and the administration should, of course, respond to any sort of questions. But I realized that in my excess of transparency, I kind of made a mistake, because then you made some accusations or some insinuations about a staffer of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And at the end of the meeting, we had a wrap-up with our legal counsel, with Ambassador Zanier, who's also been Secretary General for 2 terms in the organization. And after this meeting, I was in the impression, okay, well, finally, a standing committee where they don't just say, great job, because normally we always have received up to, I don't know, recently, great praises on the work of the Secretary. This was the first time that we heard some dissenting voices and a bit some critical voices from members. But so I said to my staff, look, oh, wow, for once there is a more animated bureau, some more questions like this. And my colleague said, look, but you're taking it too lightly, because Mr. Coles has made some allegations in this meeting which could be liable for... I'm just saying how it happened. So I said, okay, what do you advise? And I was told by the legal counsel, the advice is that first you should write a letter, and the letter was written to me, explaining this. Second, you should avoid publish the video. And mind, the video publishing is something I have invented. I have tried to make it as transparent as possible since I became Secretary General. I want everything to be webcast, so sometimes I also find it a little bit difficult to be told that I'm not transparent when I am kind of the champion of transparency in this organization. But so I was told you shouldn't publish the video, but not because, and this probably is the misunderstanding in these letters, because you would be, I don't know, subject to any investigation or something, is that the organization as such could be subject to somebody presenting kind of, what do you call it, libel or something? Yes. So I said, okay, I don't want to have the secretary have to pay some legal, if somebody feels insulted by your comments and decides to sue the secretariat, I cannot put the secretary in the position to have to pay. And so I was told the best thing to do is to write a letter and also to inform all delegations. So, Madam President, you said you were not informed. All delegations were informed that these videos were, so there was a widespread information sharing to everyone saying we shouldn't publish this video. I'm of the opinion that you could publish anything. Honestly, if there is nobody who's going to present any allegations against the Secretariat and we don't have to pay financial consequences for me, I have no problem in publishing everything. But I was advised like this by legal, and we sent you a letter. And then I was in a meeting with Madam President when our media officer was here, informed us that your reply was published on Twitter, and you have a big Twitter account with 20,000 members. And so we kind of agreed with the President, our legal counsel, that we should refrain from taking any other action, because if we had decided to write again, maybe this would be in the public domain, and therefore I have attempted to come to see you and explain what I'm saying now in this moment in person to kind of clear the ground. But the decision not to respond to your second letter, which for us was seen for the first time on Twitter before we actually received it, was not to escalate too much this in the public domain, but kind of de-escalate and provide all the answers to your questions. And I have here a file with me with all the questions that you may have, and I would be happy to you and to other interested members, if you are in a separate moment during this annual session, to come, and I can provide full answers to all the doubts, the questions, and I must confess, legitimate questions that you may have, because you said it in Vienna, you are a newcomer to this assembly. Before you made your statement, said you are a newcomer. So, of course, as a newcomer, you've been informed by some colleagues about some things that are of your concern. And I think it is my responsibility to actually inform you and give you a detailed explanation of what are your doubts. So I'm very happy to do this to you and to any many other members who would want to join you. But I think it's now time to move on to our political priorities and not to escalate this into further questions. I think Ben Cardin, Senator Cardin.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I would just like to ask the Standing Committee before we go any further if the members of Standing Committee agree to continue the meeting to 1 o'clock. And also in respect that there will be no interpretation because their session ends 12:30. Yes, but this is, Luigi is saying here, very correct, that there is a lot of other things. But I believe it's important that we continue the meeting until 1 o'clock. Is that agreed? Thank you. So now I noticed that Senator Ben Cardin have requested the floor. Richard Cools have requested the floor. Anybody else? Senator Ben Cardin, head of the U.S. delegation, the floor is yours.
Madam President, I'm going to try to get us to move on. If Mr. Coles wants to speak first, I don't mind him going first, and I would go after Mr. Coles if that would be acceptable or whatever. Same topic, yes. I would like to, okay, well, let me go, if I might. I think I've been to more meetings of the annual session than anyone else that's here. I've been over 30 years. I've been attending meetings of the Parliamentary Assembly. And the U.S. delegation has given this organization an awful lot of our energy, but we also gave you Spencer Oliver. And for those who know Spencer Oliver and his career here, we had some similar debates in the Parliamentary Assembly on concerns about the way that the Secretariat is operating. It's one of the toughest jobs you can imagine, to try to harmonize all of our views in our states. And then he has to also manage a staff and carry out the budgetary responsibilities. And there's bound to be challenges in doing that and trying to provide balance within our organization. I agree with Richard Hudson's point about our confidence in the Secretary General. I must tell you, I appreciate the passion and energy of Mr. Coles. I've told him that personally. We need that passion in this organization. It's passion for the principles of our organization, and it's passion for democracy and democratic institutions. But I also recognize that when you're dealing with individual people, personnel issues, you need to understand the sensitivity of that information, even if it involves a person who happens to be a citizen of a state that we have great challenges with. And even if it involves concerns that you might have about that person's tenure in our organization, it needs to be handled in a sensitive way, because our responsibilities as an organization are not only to our member states, but we're hosts of the Denmark government in Copenhagen. We have personnel rules we have to follow. And we have to be sensitive that that needs to be discussed sometimes in private conversations rather than in collective conversations. But I really want to underscore the point that Richard Hudson made. This session, we are united in support of Ukraine against the aggression of Russia. We are proud to have set up the ad hoc committee. And you're going to see in each of our committees the unity that we have. The message from this annual session needs to be that unity in support of Ukraine and making clear that Russia needs to be held accountable for its atrocities. It doesn't mean we don't take up these issues. We do. But we're not going to resolve it in this standing committee in this manner. So I just urge that we have those private discussions, and to the extent there needs to be disclosure to the standing committee, the disclosures are made after those discussions. But we're not going to resolve it by continuing these discussions in this manner. And I just would urge us to recognize that this is an organization that can be extremely effective in carrying out the Helsinki commitments, and make sure we aren't divided in that effort. Let's move forward.
Thank you, Senator Ben Cardin. I have on my speakers list Mr. Richard Cools and Vice President Pia Kauma. Can we then end this discussion? It looks like that. There is some more?
Yes, I asked a question. I would like to know, has there been erased or removed any video material from our homepage? And who has the authorization to do so?
Yes.
And was you informed?
Thank you. I will put it further on to Secretary General, and I responded that I don't know about any video material that have been removed. Next speaker on my list is Richard Cools. The floor is yours. It's head of the Latvian delegation.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you all those who talked on this topic, my case with Secretary General. With all due respect, I'm not here just, enthusiastically, passionately go around things, but that was a serious precedent when elected representative from one of the member states is being threatened with a legal case with information that he shared from publicly available information. The notions that I mentioned were actually from the think tank. It's publication available publicly. So if there's any concerns about that, legal case may be brought against the OECE member operates with publicly available information, not something that he has made up. But on contrary, on this effect, on the video, withdrawing this video, and this is a legitimate question. And Secretary General, with all due respect, there's so many contradictions in what you said. When and who was sent, and to everyone that was sent information that this video won't be circulated, it's a false information. I mean, we can ask the members of delegations. But obviously, my intention is not to continue this, but my intention is to actually, Secretary General is not a political figure in OECE. Your remarks on that I'm a newcomer to the Parliamentary Assembly, well, I've been here for 3 terms in the Parliament. So I think I know what the Parliament Assembly is and what members can and cannot talk. To tell me what are my limitations is clearly out of your responsibilities. And this is why I'm addressing this, that there should be a very clear line where there's a political engagement when there's administrative engagement. And with this, I would really say that, this can be talked through sitting down and having a coffee. You see, if I'm having a coffee with Secretary General, we have a verbal discussion. Because of my verbal discussion in winter meeting, I was threatened with a criminal case. So where I have the guarantees as MP right now that for any of my action or what I'm saying here, I will not be threatened again with a criminal case being opened against me. And for the record, as far as I know, I'm not the only case when from the Secretary General there's indication that somebody might face criminal investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Richard Cools. Next speaker on my list is Ms. Vice President Pia Kauma. The floor is yours, Madam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I decided to take the floor after the speech of Senator Cardin. I entirely agree with Senator Cardin in everything that he said, and also he reminded me of Spencer Oliver, whom we all know. I started my career, so to speak, here at the OSCE EPA in 2011 when we were still living the days of Spencer Oliver, and I remember having this type of discussions already then. I think we all need to stand united and with Ukraine. Russia needs to be held accountable. I'm really concerned that this kind of written correspondence between Secretary General and Richard Coles would end up in the hands of Russia and wrongly used against OSCE EPA. And I personally was present at the meeting in Warsaw where this discussion took place, what we are now talking about. And I would like to say that I think that Mr. Coles misunderstood the meaning of the letter sent by Secretary General. To my understanding, Secretary General only wanted to protect Mr. Coles and the employee of the Secretariat from any kind of public or legal proceedings. The only meaning of the letter was to protect, not to sue anybody or anything mean by that letter. I really would like to end this conversation, and I think we have much more important issues in this OSCE meeting to talk about. I'm really concerned about the future of this organization, and I think we should rather talk about what we are going to do in order to keep this organization alive and viable to the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Pia Kauma. Next speaker on my list is head of the Netherlands delegation, Ms. Farah Karimi, and I have noticed that Georgia, head of Georgian delegation, have requested the floor, as well as there is a gentleman. Oh, yes, and then head of the Cyprus delegation. But I give the floor right now to head of the Netherlands delegation, Ms. Farah Karimi. The floor is yours, madam.
Thank you very much, and I will keep actually my contribution very short, because I think our colleagues from the United States, Senator Cardin and Mr. Richard Hudson, made really very valid point, and also the contribution of our colleague Pia Kauma has been very valuable. I was the one who made actually a direct comment to the contribution of our colleague from Latvia in Vienna. I said it directly during the meeting, and I said this is not appropriate actually to name a staff member who is not here, who can't actually defend herself and make accusations. So in that sense, I think that was already clear also from a parliamentarian to a parliamentarian. So we are also setting the norms and values for the way that we debate the things. We can disagree, we can have issues, and we should debate on that, but please let us keep our interventions actually according to our values and to our norms. So that's what I wanted actually to add to the discussion till now, and would really advise our colleague from Latvia, Mr. Kols, and also Secretary General to discuss this issue, and let us move. Let us move, because we have really other things on our agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Farah Karimi. Next speaker on my list is head of the Georgian delegation, Mr. Nicholas Samakachev. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, since we spoke a lot about transparency, I felt obliged to also ask for the floor, because frankly speaking, the Georgian delegation also had questions about the recruitment procedure and about the whole process. But I addressed the Secretary General that I had legitimate questions about this. And then the Secretary General was very forthcoming. We had about an hour-long discussion about the procedures, about the rules, about the background of the decision. So I got all my answers from the Secretary General about this very sensitive issue. And please also be aware that this is a very sensitive issue and very sensitive topic for the Georgian delegation as well, because Georgia is also a country which is occupied by the Russian Federation. So I encourage everyone to get into direct contact with the Secretariat, and if they fail to provide you with answers, then of course we'll take another course of action. So this is what I wanted to say, not to keep it privately from me, because since we talk a lot about transparent, we also had doubts and we also had questions, but all our questions were addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nicolas Samkarache. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Laurinias Kauchinas, Rapporteur of the First Committee. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. You know, hearing the discussions, it looks like what we are making from Richard Cole's a scapegoat, you know, what he raised the questions and what he's now guilty. I think he raised very important questions, and the answers to these questions should be formulated. First of all, for me, it's not a clear thing what Mr. Jensen also asked. So it was the decision to remove the video. How it was according to the procedures. Do we do it according to political decisions or do it on the administrative decisions? It's, you know, we are talking about parliamentarians' freedom of speech. It's a fundamental thing. So one thing which is not clear for me. Another thing is restrictions of member of parliament to talk. Richard Coles is the chairman of Latvian Foreign Affairs Committee, well-known, well-respected politician. So I think he can raise all the questions and get the answers. I understand the forms how to get the answers can be different, and I agree, but please do not hide these problems under the carpet. So still we need the answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Laurinias Kauchinas. Next speaker on my list is the head of the Cypriotic delegation, Ms. Irene Charalambidis. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President, Cyprus delegation. Now, you know that I talk a lot about freedom of speech. I'm a journalist myself, I'm a parliamentarian. I have to defend the freedom of speech and transparency. So I have a very important question for all of us. As I understand, according to Section 24 of the agreement between Austria and OSCE, there is immunity for members of the OSCPA that is guaranteed in Vienna, when we are in Vienna, due to the agreement I mentioned before between Austria and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Now, is this the case for every country that hosts our events? And if it's not, then we should do something about this, because we enjoy immunity in our own countries. In Vienna, we do have immunity. Do we have immunity here in Canada, or did we have immunity in Poland? If we don't, then it's a responsibility of the Secretariat and the Bureau and our leadership to guarantee immunity for the members of this assembly in every single country that hosts our events. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Irene Charalambidis. Before I give the floor to Secretary General, I would like to add, as it was raised here, about a question about a staff of the Secretariat. I was chairing the meeting. I gave the floor to Richard Coles. I was intended to interrupt because it was mention of staff of the Secretariat. Secretary General asked me to not stop. That was correctly described. I felt very uncomfortable when it was mentioned a name of the staff. I can agree on that. Then it was a long debate at the Standing Committee about various issues. I have got a lot of comments from colleagues after the meeting who didn't like the meeting as such because it was very tense atmosphere. It was not only because of Richard Kuhl's question. I will underline that because it was an overall atmosphere. And I think it was a difficult meeting, and I think all who attended the meeting can agree on that. The meeting was recorded, and it was not published immediately. That's what I remember, because of the situation with media as well. There were a lot of media who were interested in the debates. Or was it this in Warsaw? My memory goes a little.
All our meetings are webcast.
Yes, but there was something that was not webcasted because it was a very intense discussion. It might have been in the meeting in Warsaw that we didn't, from the Standing Committee. It might have been there. It goes together in my memory because I didn't take a note of which meeting it was. But I think what's happened there, it was also regarding that we have had if we go back to the winter meeting, the meeting with Russia attending, it was a huge media pressure. There were a huge pressure from governmental side. I was in meetings with, not in meeting personnel, but on phone calls with a lot of ministers who requested us to withdraw the meeting. And I put forward that we should hold the meeting, so it was tense. Then, after this part, it was the Standing Committee. And I think what's happened there, it reflects also the situation we have with a war in the region, that there is difficulties to handle a situation when there is a war going on. A war fosters other problems. That's a lot of, research on that, we could see it. And we need to, of course, to continue our work. I think it's important that there is trust, that there is accountability from all sides. And time is running here. There is a lot of others on the agenda. I don't want to be the one who interrupt important discussions and dialogue, because we as parliamentarians need to be the one who ask questions and hold accountable. But time is running. And I think that these discussions should be held, but I am not sure it should be here right now, continued in the format of the Standing Committee. I am willing to sit down together to discuss this. I can tell you that I was a bit surprised about the letters that were sent out, but I was also surprised about a lot of other things. And I can tell you that there were several other things happened in the background. I was surprised about the letter that Secretary General sent out, but I can tell you that there were a lot of other things that happened in the background that Secretary General have to handle. And you did it very well with those things. I am not going to tell you about what happened in the background, but it was other things. And I was involved in those discussions. And I said all the time about those things that I stand on your side. And I continue and do it on these things because we shouldn't have those discussions on the table because nobody deserves to have it. And I say this because I think it's important to know that it's not always what we see in front of our eyes that are the fact. There is also some things that might go on behind. And I'm not saying I have the full picture. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that I stand behind here because you had a very difficult situation, Roberto.
Thank you.
And that was good handled.
Thank you.
And I don't think we should continue this discussion because
Couldn't agree more.
nobody will win on this. But if there is a need, let's discuss this in a closed room with those who need a discussion, but not here in the Assembly. Can we agree on this? Thank you. So, then we have ended number 7. And let's go further on. And now we have number 8. Information on upcoming meetings of the OSCE-PA in 2023. At the last winter meeting, the Standing Committee was informed that Uzbekistan would be unable to host our 2023 autumn meeting. On 1st May, a letter jointly signed by the Secretary General and I was to all parliaments of OSCE participating or partner states to find a new host for our 2023 autumn meeting. I am glad to announce that we have since received an offer from the National Assembly of the Republic of Armenia. This letter has been made available in the electronic folder. This would be the first time that a statutory meeting of the OSCE-PA takes place in Armenia. I invite the Standing Committee to welcome this invitation. Do the Standing Committee agree? I have the head of the Armenian delegation, Sardish Kadanyan, on the speakers list, and I have head of the Ukrainian delegation, Mr. Mikita Potorayev. Please, the floor is yours, Mr.
Madam President,
Sardish Kadanyan.
I also want to take the floor.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. As the security situation and challenges are continuing to shake the OSCE region, we believe that it is becoming even more important for this interparliamentary dialogue. And as you said in your opening remarks, multilateralism exists, but I think we need to also help the multilateralism to exist. And we need to make sure that this organization functions normally. That is why, following your appeal, Madam President and Secretary General, we decided, and we are very excited to host the autumn meeting of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly this year in Yerevan, Armenia. I believe that this is also a good opportunity for the Assembly and the members of this Assembly to focus also on the current challenges and ongoing challenges that the South Caucasus region is experiencing, and of course to enjoy the Armenian hospitality. And with this, I want to invite all the members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly to Yerevan, Armenia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sargis Kadanyan. And now I will give the floor to head of the Ukrainian delegation, Mr. Mikita Potorayev. He will be followed by the head of Azerbaijan delegation, Mr. Asay Gulyev. Mr. Mikita Potorayev.
Yes, dear colleagues. First of all, let me stress that OSCE meeting in the capital of Armenia could help, on our opinion, at least two very important issues. First one, presence of OSCE meeting in Armenia could show to the whole world that OSCE is supporting democratic government and parliament of Armenia, which are focused on reforming democratic and liberal reforming their country. Second, I absolutely believe and sure that OSCE meeting in Yerevan could also help the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, because as you understand, we as a country which suffers from large-scale invasion, we support the process which could restore internationally recognized borders of Azerbaijan and at the same time to create a long-term peace between these two countries, our friends and brothers in Azerbaijan and our friends and brothers in Armenia. But at the same time, colleagues, you know about our complicated attitude to all events where representatives of terroristic and criminal state are present. So I'm afraid, and I would like to stress on this fact, that unfortunately in Armenia, considering of course their hard political situation, there will be a huge paratroop group of Russian politicians, which of course cause a lot of problems for us. Plus, I have to tell you sincerely that, well, as colleague Karl Lambidis of OSCE members, parliamentarians, for us in Armenia, it's not a question of immunity, it's a question of security. Because unfortunately, there is a lot of so-called good Russians, in my opinion, too much so-called good Russians in Armenia now. There are, as far as I remember, 2 military bases of Russian army in Armenia. So we will, again, supporting and appreciating the role of OSCE in establishing long-term peace and democratic reforms in Armenia. We will have to think about our participants because of, again, two reasons. We hardly imagine ourselves in one event with strong Russian and Belarusian representation. And second, we have to think about security of all members of Ukrainian delegation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mikita Potorayev. I prolong the meeting to 1 o'clock. It's already almost 10 minutes past 1. I hope we can end in 5 minutes because it's important that we hold the time so you can go and have lunch and side events and the other things that are on the agenda. So now I kindly ask all of you to be very firm in your comments because otherwise the day will be ruined. That's the fact. I will give the floor to head of the Azerbaijan delegation, Asay Gulyev. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues and dear friends, I would like to start by sharing the concern of our colleagues, Irina Karlambias and Nikita Potorayev, about the security of the participating states or the participants or delegations attending any statutory meetings of the Parliamentary Assembly. I'm afraid that in that case, Armenia doesn't hold enough capacity to give security guarantee for at least Azerbaijani delegations to attend the autumn meeting in Armenia. Why I am saying that? Just I want to bring one vivid example. As you may know, this year, 14th of April, there was the European the weightlifting championship hosted by Armenia in Yerevan. At that international event, one of the, let's say, member of the organizing committee, Aram Nikolyan, in the opening ceremony, ran into the stage, seized an Azerbaijani flag, and burned it in front of everyone, including Prime Minister Pashinyan. Once faced international pressure, Armenian police took him to custody, but immediately set him free without any charges, and even worse, the person was publicly glorified for burning a flag of participating state of an international event while the lives of Azerbaijani athletes were under the threat. After such an incident, attesting to the
I do kindly ask
atmosphere-
all participants to try to be very concise because we are running out of time.
Madam President, it is very important thing. It is about the security, about the life of the participating states or the people. You have to make sure that this security guarantee is ensured. Otherwise, I just want to bring an example. After having faced such a, let's say, brutal attitude in Yerevan, Azerbaijani athletes had to leave Yerevan without participating, without taking part in the competition. So I am asking a question. It is a legitimate question. Do you have any guarantee for security of Azerbaijan delegations to take part in this autumn meeting? It is a very legitimate question that needs to be addressed and clarified. This is just my question, and I hope that without making any decision, we have to take into consideration all the circumstances in order to make sure that all participating states are safe, are secured, and feel without any fear or any potential threat. This is why Mr. Paturayev and Madam Irina Karalambies were enough right to raising this issue. I also joined to raise this issue and hope that Madam President, the other corresponding people or Secretary General can clarify this issue and make the guarantee for all the participating states. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guliev. Before we continue, I have noticed you on the speakers list, Ms. Charalambidis. I just would like to add here, before we continue with the security discussion, that our Secretariat will, of course, work with the security issue. They do always do this when it comes to our meetings, both by themselves, but also together with the host. It was done when we had our winter meeting in Vienna, and it was performed in a secure way. I say it because it's a responsibility for the Secretariat, and I have no doubt about that. And on my speakers list, I have Bulgaria, and I have Cyprus. I will give the floor to Armenia at the end because I don't want us to sit here. And I have, yes. Is there anybody else who wants to have the floor on this matter? I don't see so. So I give the floor to Bulgaria. Mr. Head, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stanislav Anastasov, the head of the Bulgarian delegation. I'll be very brief. Of course, having an OSCE event in Armenia would show some support for the gradual democratic changes that the country is showing. But hosting the OSCE event is not only about hospitality. I fully agree with the concerns of the Ukrainian delegation, and I also solidarize with some of the concerns of the Azerbaijan delegation, especially in the light of the UN decisions on the conflict in Nagorno in the region. But let us have this discussion about the security, and let us have this discussion about the ability of a country to host an OSCE event. Because in my opinion, we have this case with Bulgaria, you know, that we wanted to host the autumn session in Bulgaria, the winter session. But because of the gradual political stability that's coming to Bulgaria, we haven't done that. And I'm not sure that this is the case with Armenia, to have a political stability and to have regional issues that are solved. In our opinion, a country that is hosting an OSCE event should be very, very neutral to all of us as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanislav Anastasov, head of the Bulgarian delegation. Then I give the floor to Vice President Irene Charalambidis. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I didn't speak about security. I spoken about immunity. It's completely different. And then I would like to say this, in the spirit of this organization, if the autumn meeting was supposed to take place in Istanbul, organized by Turkey, I would have very much welcomed it. And I'm Cypriot, and I wouldn't go on talking about security and things like that, and I would have trusted the Turkish government that would take all the precautions that needed to make us feel safe. Also, I was in the elections in Istanbul, and everything was fluent. So I don't think this is the right way to approach things. Every single country has the right to propose and host an event of OSCPA. That's why we are here. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. And now I will give the floor to head of the Armenian delegation, Mr. Sargis Kardanyan. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Potuarev, thank you for correctly identifying the current challenges of our region and also for praising the democratic reforms that are happening in Armenia. And I think, as I said in my initial speech, that it is very important for this assembly to also focus on the challenges that we are experiencing in the region, and Armenia would be a good platform to discuss it. When it comes to security concerns, I want to stress it is a bit offensive for me when the members of this assembly are worried that their security will be challenged in Armenia. I can assure you that we will take all necessary measures for the security of members. And as it comes to the participation of the Azerbaijani delegation, it can be very hard to imagine for a lot of Armenian peoples that we can host MPs from Azerbaijan, but this is not the first time, and I want to stress that we will invite all the members of this assembly, including the delegation of Azerbaijan, and will ensure the security of the delegation of Azerbaijan. And 2 years ago in Yerevan, we hosted the Parliamentary Assembly of the Euronest, the Eastern neighborhood, and delegation of Azerbaijan was present, and one of them is also a member of this assembly, and you can ask Mr. Guliev, your colleagues, how was their security ensured and how they felt in Yerevan. And once again, I invite you all to Yerevan, and I hope we will have a great autumn meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sargis Kardanyan. And now I have noticed that the head of the Slovakian delegation have requested the floor. The floor is yours, sir. And please
thank you, Lady President. I would like to refuse the of our Bulgarian colleague asking for stable situation. Of course, there is no one country in which someone can guarantee that there will not appear one single man or woman doing anything not normal. But I would never discuss how stable is Kingdom of Sweden due to things that can occur. But we cannot say the situation in the country is unstable. And that's why there is a Slovak proverb, if you want to beat a dog, you will find a stick. And if we want to declare Armenia is unstable, then colleague Guliev can find, of course, a dramatic story of one single man's activity. But I would never decide about the site of our sessions thinking about possibility that one single man or woman can do anything that is unexpected but possible. Things are happening, but I fully support the Armenian possibility to organize our session. I was witness as the head of all observer delegation in December years ago of Armenian miracle of Yerevan, where the country started to choose the way to democracy, and I am fully persuaded that Armenia is on the right way and that the state will do everything that colleague Guliev will be there and come back home without any harm.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Osuski. Now, I don't see anybody else. If I understood the situation right, there is a lot of concerns about the security, but I haven't heard anybody oppose and saying, don't go to Armenia. So I recognize that there will be a decision that the autumn meeting will be held in Armenia. Thank you. And then I have some more dates to announce. The new elected bureau will meet on the 29th of November, prior to the Ministerial Council meeting in Skopje. And as customary, the winter meeting will be held in Vienna in the end of February. The 31st annual session will take place in Bucharest, Romania. The 24th autumn meeting will take place in Dublin, Ireland. And as announced at the last meeting, the 2025 annual session will be hosted by Portugal. I would like to warmly thank all those delegations for offering to host the OSCE-PA statutory meetings. This is one of the concrete ways for national parliaments to support the work of the Assembly. We greatly appreciate the generosity and commitment to the Assembly. And I have noticed that there are comments, so I give the floor to the Romanian delegation, but I do kindly ask you to be brief, because it's very soon 1:30. The floor is for the Romanian delegation.
I will be very brief, Ms. President. Dear colleagues, 1 year by now, from 29 of June till 3 of July, will be the assembly in Bucharest. We welcome all of you there. And here, in front of the main room, is a stand for Bucharest, presenting our country, some Romanian sweets, and we wait for you there. So just simple. We'll work together with the Secretary General for a great and successful assembly, and I'm sure we'll meet there next year. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dan Bana, head of the Romanian delegation. And by this, I say thank you to all members of the Standing Committee. Thank you for your contribution and for your work, and wish you a pleasant lunch, and see you sharply 3 o'clock when we start the General Assembly. Thank you once again.
Just a quick announcement that do not leave your belongings in the room because it will be rearranged, and do not take the headphones for interpretation. Thank you.